So, are you curious?
Welcome to the Curiosity Codex. My name is Kyle Olson, and joining me is my co-host, Mr. Rob Cabasco.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, well, we're starting a brand new thing, so let me tell everybody what's going on. So before we get into capes and cowls, which I know is what you're here for, I wanted to talk a little upfront about what this show is. So one of my favorite things in life is introducing people to things that I love that I think they'll like as well. But as entertainment moves into more complex categories with transmedia properties, adaptations, time travel, multiple realities, what's in canon, what's out of canon, it can make it difficult to know where to start on something new. That's where we come in. So I'm not here to convince you that something is great or not. That's not up to me. Plus, we have a show that's dedicated to that topic. It's called Silver Linings. You should listen to it. It's very, very good. What I want to do is give you context, history, a framework for which you can approach these complex narratives. Let me give you an example from my life that inspired this. When I was a young man, there were two films that everyone talked about, but that I looked on as incomprehensible. One was regarded as great, one regarded as terrible. Those films are The Godfather and Dune. So in college, two of my friends sat me down to watch each of them. Both of them had seen these movies, plus all the sequels, plus read all the original source materials. They knew all of their stuff. So as we'd watch, whenever I'd get overwhelmed or confused, they'd pause and we'd talk about it. So they shepherded me through all the complexities and weirdness, and at the end, I got it. Like, I understood what was going on. I could tell why people loved these movies. But I'm not saying every movie or television show should come with a guidebook. But one chief element of geek culture is complexity. We love bizarre homages, the winks and hat tips to original source material, nerdy theories, headcanon, fanfic. These are all just ways of deepening our reverence for the material and keeping it alive in our minds, but it can also make it daunting for the newbies. I hate gatekeepers. I hate the term true fan, or anybody who tries to keep people from getting into the thing that they themselves love. How dare you? Instead, I want to demystify. I want to lay bare the path. I want to become a Sherpa to lead you through these winding paths. An arch-geekologist who can give you a guidebook into the thing that we're looking at. And we're going to need torches, headlamps, and giant neon signs to get through today's topic, because we're talking about the DC Extended Universe, sometimes known as the Snyderverse. We're on the verge of the release of a 4-hour superhero movie that both pays off threads from hours of stories and sets up sequels that will never be made. But how did we come to this? Why is this such a big deal? And where do you even begin? That's where the Curiosity Codex comes in. So this story starts with a guy named Zach and a tale of the undead.
1, 2, 3. There's a zombie on your lawn. There's a zombie on your lawn. There's a zombie on your lawn. We don't want zombies on our lawn.
Yes, that's right. Zack Snyder's first film, his most notable one, I should say, is the remake of Dawn of the Dead from 2004. Of course, that music was not from that movie. That was actually from the video game Plants vs. Zombies. That was the song you unlocked if you actually beat the game. So Dawn of the Dead was a remake of George Romero's original movie. So this was the first thing. So Zack Snyder took it and sort of 2000'd it. So it was still the basically story of survivors of a zombie apocalypse, and they're all trapped in a mall. So it had Sarah Polley, Ving Rhames, Jake Weber, Mekhi Phifer, and our own Ty Burrell. We talked a lot about him in the Marvel Movie Minute, and so that was his first thing. And it's a decent movie. I think people still prefer the original, but I think it did in the zombie thing. I think it's held up pretty well. Have you seen his Dawn of the Dead?
Oh yeah, Rob? Yeah. I've seen that one. Let me just get caught up here because I'm mesmerized by that opening.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Rob is going to be our audience surrogate here because I've told him very little about what's going to happen here on the Codex.
I
want him to sort of react in real time.
Yeah. Let me just tell you something. I'm ready to just bundle myself up, strap me to your back, and lead me away, lead me along as you Sherpa our way through this. I'm totally excited. I gotta also then go back and play some Plants vs. Zombies after we're done recording this, because now I'm totally into that. No, like I enjoyed that movie. I remember thinking it was a unique rethinking of that genre. Like I remember that, and I remember it had like a funky twist ending. I won't give anything away.
Yeah.
Right. And it was cool because it was an interesting cast of characters and mainly because it had Ving Rhames. Which was, it seemed like an odd, if I remember correctly, it seemed like a very odd role for him to take, but it made it fun because he was established by the time he was in that.
True. And yeah, most people in there were sort of a similar star status that you didn't always know who was going to live and who was going to die.
Right. That too.
So that made it also that, which is good in a zombie movie. So that was kind of one of the rebirth of zombie movies. That's where they sort of came. So, like, from that sort of era was also then Shaun of the Dead. 28 Days Later. It was about the same kind of time period. Yeah. So like it really started sort of this rebirth of zombie movies to make them a more viable thing, because they had been sort of relegated to the schlock bin. I mean, like, there was sort of the all the iterations of Living Dead after the original Night of the Living Dead, the Return of the Living Dead and Revenge of the Living Dead, and all of these things that were sort of, they got gorier and stranger and more niche. This was very much a mainstream movie, and so that took Zack Snyder and sort of elevated him to get on Hollywood's radar, essentially. He wasn't A-list from this, but he was more than just a sort of schlock director, which is, when you start out in horror, sometimes you can just kind of stay in horror. Not everybody's James Gunn.
Right.
And so you can sometimes just like have, and some people can have a very good career doing this, so I'm not disparaging that, but sort of like when you're on the way up. But this is the next time that he sort of got attention, was when he actually did another comic book adaptation. So this is the time when he really got on Hollywood's radar with a tale of very scantily clad men.
Bartend and starters, show this petty up and the who's the hardest. The biggest mistake that you've ever made. I'll toss you like a frag grenade. I'll stomp you in the face with my sandals and rage, and tonight we shall ride in the shade.
Of course, that's also not from the movie.
I was going to say...
300. So that little piece of audio comes from the epic rap battles of history, Master Chief versus Leonidas. So this was the first time that we'd seen that Zach was a comic book fan. So this was based on the 1998 comic series by Frank Miller and Lynn Varley. It was a fairly well received one, but it was sort of an indie, sort of a little more obscure comic, and so when it sort of got adapted, people were kind of surprised, because it's sort of like, how are you're going to really make a movie out of like a bunch of dudes just fighting with swords? And okay, and then we saw it and went, oh,
all right.
So this is sort of a something we've never really seen before. It was sort of taking that sword and sandals genre, which was what Hollywood tends to refer to things as, sort of out of the Gladiator and Ben-Hur thing, and putting it in much more of a comic book format. This is 2006, so we'd already seen, so the X-Men movies had been out and the Spider-Man movies had been out, so we were sort of seeing the beginnings of what would become the comic book renaissance, and so this is a definite important chapter in that, because we got to see it, and this is also where we learned about speed ramping. We talked about speed ramping on the Marvel Movie Minute as well, because it shows up in Incredible Hulk, because it was everywhere after this, and so the what people a lot of times refer to as slow-mo, but it's not actually slow motion. It's shooting at such a high frame rate that you can slow the action down, but the actors move in real time, and they slow down and then speed it back up again. So it's used to very good effect too, and it's also used by Zack Snyder to sort of make comic book panels.
Right.
So like, someone will leap up in the air and then he'll slow it down to like, boom, there's your amazing image, and then continue on. And also we'll start seeing some of the things that will be prevalent over the course of the things, including like super alpha male aggro, the use of music, being super dramatic, way over the top, and sort of incredible visuals and not incredible amounts of depth underneath them. I would not say Zack Snyder is one for subtlety.
No, I can remember when this movie came out. I remember going to see it because there was so much hype, and I was not familiar with the comic. And I will say, like, okay, anyone who's seen it, and if you haven't seen it, you should, and just know that it is, gratuitous violence. However, it was unlike anything you had seen before. You had never seen this type of portrayal exactly of like the Ben-Hur genre film, but you had not seen anything graded like this, colorized. You know what I mean? Like, it just, it had a different sheen to everything you were seeing, and plus the music and, like you said, everything else. It was kind of rock and roll to the Stone Age, and it definitely got into it, and that's why it's permeated pop culture quite a bit. I mean, even to this day. So I mean, it's a significant movie for a lot of reasons. Yeah,
it's still, and everyone knows it is a cultural touch point.
Yeah.
Like people, you talk about 300, and they say this is Sparta. You know,
Right.
It's also way over the top.
Right.
I mean, that's part of it. It wasn't never meant to be anything realistic. It was supposed to be superheroes in togas, essentially.
Right.
I mean, like it was everything was supposed to be over the top. I mean, like when the villain shows up, he's 9 feet tall and covered in gold piercings. Like, it was never supposed to be like any type of historical record.
Right.
And people loved it. And so from that we got a bunch of pretty significant actors sort of have got their start there. Gerard Butler, obviously Gerard Butler's still working today. David Wenham, who was in the Lord of the Rings films. Lena Headey, who'd go on to be on Game of Thrones. Like, this was her first sort of big Hollywood role. And then Dominic West, who was mostly known for The Wire, was in there too. So it was adapted a lot of stuff. The comic added a bunch of stuff in there. But then people thought it was fairly accurate to the comic book too, enough so that he actually recreated individual panels from the comic. So after that, he did Legend of the Guardians, Owls of Ga'Hoole, and Sucker Punch. And I really don't care to talk about either of those.
Yeah.
I don't think they really contribute to what we're talking about here, and
Right.
I'm not a big fan of either of them. So let's keep on sort of our topic, which is comic book adaptations, because then finally they were like, you know what? I think he's ready for a major project, a huge comic book characters, to really get into something important, and to talk about basically to film the unfilmable. And so he got his next major project.
Oh no, Adrian! Looks like the Reds are polluting the city lake! What do we do?
We call the Watchmen. Strong together, united forever, they're the best of friends. But when trouble's about, you'd best watch out for the Watchmen.
Now is their leader, and he loves to party down. Rorschach's rents to the animals.
Yeah, when he's not clowning around.
Why, nutty!
Beat up some thugs, say no to drugs, be in bed by 10. But if trouble's about, you'd best watch out for the Watchmen.
What?
So that was Watchmen. So that is actually from that was Saturday Morning Watchmen by a brilliant creator named Harry Partridge on YouTube. Check out his stuff. It has a whole animated 80s beginning to it. That's great. I mean, that was just like the first part. There's like another whole verse where they show each of them and how it was sort of like they took the idea of the Watchmen babies that they did on The Simpsons and did their own version of it too. It's very, very good. So Watchmen. So this is based on the 86-87 DC Comic limited series by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. So the Wikipedia says the synopsis for it is a dark and dystopian deconstruction of the superhero genre. The film was set in alternate history in the year 1985 at the height of the Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union as a group of mostly retired American superheroes investigate the murder of one of their own before uncovering an elaborate and deadly conspiracy while their moral limitations are challenged by the complex nature of the circumstances. That's a pretty good thing. Even though it leaves out, drugs and rape and murder and genocide and all the other fun stuff that's part of this.
Yeah, that movie is filled with a lot of things.
Yeah, so the comic book is one of those, like, there's a couple that are held up as being like important, like these are literature, these are beyond just your typical punch 'em slug up, and this was with that. So Alan Moore got a chance to sort of do his take on superheroes, and so he didn't use any of the traditional ones. Originally, the idea was that he was going to use existing characters, and then as they developed the story, that's why Rorschach looks like the Question, is because originally he was going to use the Charleston characters. So if you look at the Charleston characters and then they sort of line up almost exactly. So he decided to do his own, then that way he wouldn't be beholden to anyone else and nobody be like, hey, how dare you do that to my favorite character? He's like, no, these are all brand new. So it's basically like the story says, it's about it's a murder mystery, but then it's also about violence. It's about like the people who put on the uniform and why they do. Like some of them are just want to inflict violence on other people, and so they do it under the guise of putting on a costume. Some people actually want to do good, but they're terrible at it, and so they end up making things worse. Some people are, it's their kink. There's all sorts of, it's very capital A adult. It's very messy. It's very, but also I'd say messy in terms of like the repercussions on the characters, because it's very, very plotted out. Like every panel is decided on. Every layout of the page is decided on. It's very, very deliberate in storytelling. And then because of that, it was basically thought to be unfilmable. No one assumed there's all sorts of people want to do this because it's hugely popular. It's one of the best-selling comics of all time. People want to do that. Terry Gilliam was attached to it for a really, really long time, and there's a television adaptation at some point. They had all these things they were talking about doing, but no one ever do it. And then finally, they decided, like the movie, and then they saw 300 and went, "That's our guy." They decided like that Zack Snyder was the person to bring it to the story. And the thing I thought was interesting is that I don't have the exact quote here, but one of the main reasons Zack Snyder took it is he thought he'd screw it up the least. He basically got the impression for Warner Brothers is that they were going to do it, and he'd read the Terry Gilliam script and hated it because apparently it eliminated Dr. Manhattan. It involved a time travel thing at the end where they end up in our world. It was just very, very strange. And so he went, if anybody else does this, they're going to adapt it and they're going to be terrible. What if I make, they're going to do their own version of it. What if I make as literal an adaptation of it as I can, and then it'll be done, whether it's good or not, I don't know, but like no one else will have the chance to screw it up. Like, he's not going to let Tim Burton get anywhere near it. That was the sort of, I think, his philosophy of it. And I apologize for not having the quote at my fingertips. I did find it, and I just forgot to put it in my notes. But that was the basic, his basic premise of it. And then he thought, I can probably do something with this.
Well, and okay, that's funny. I did not know the story about that. Dr. Manhattan wasn't in the original part, but you would think that a movie studio, and if you know anything about that character, you'd have to say to yourself, well, I don't know how we're going to do that in a major motion picture that's for audiences everywhere.
Right.
How do we do
this? Dr. Manhattan is a super being who's also super naked.
Yeah.
He does not, basically, he's evolved beyond clothing.
Yes, that's true. No, and then of course Zack Snyder goes and does it. I mean, that's exactly what he is, right? So, I mean, it's a hard R. Like, that movie is,
right.
Let's be clear on that.
Oh, it's definitely a hard R, yeah. I mean, and this is where we start, and Sucker Punch showed us some of this too. And I mean, 300 is definitely a hard.
Oh yeah, that as well, right?
And so you can see this is where he likes to play,
right?
And so I actually found a quote from him talking about, before the movie came out. They were Entertainment Weekly was asking about it, and they said, well, one new point of difference to make them more grim and gritty, which that's a term that's hanging around, like Hancock or The Dark Knight, which also seemed to work in Watchmen's favor. And so Zack Snyder answers, everyone says that about Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. Batman's dark. And I'm like, okay, no, Batman's cool. He gets to go to a Tibetan monastery and be trained by ninjas, okay? I want to do that. But he doesn't, get raped in prison. That could happen in my movie. If you want to talk about dark, that's how that would go.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes.
And apparently from that, they're like, you know what? That's the guy that should adopt Superman.
Sold. Sold to the man talking to us.
Yeah. Watchmen is a very interesting movie. It also is, it's close to 3 hours long. Yeah. It does basically the same kind of thing he did with 300. Is he tried to adapt the comic as much as he could in terms of panel layout. I mean, he really had the costumes look almost identical to what they're obviously, with differences being the drawn versus the actual on a human body. He tried to recreate the structure of the story, which is very, very intricate. The major difference they changed is the ending. Now, spoilers for anyone who's seen Watchmen, but in the comic books, Alan Moore is very clear about the fact that he stole his ending from an Outer Limits episode. So much so that they actually puts a reference to that particular episode in Watchmen. You read it, there's somebody's watching the episode of Outer Limits that he rips off, which is the idea that they pretend that there's an alien invasion to bring the world together. So this is in the 80s. The nuclear war is about to happen. And so a mad genius comes with the idea of, what if we can fake an alien attack, and then everyone will come together to defend against the other, the outside, the weird creature on there. Well, they kind of looked at the audience and went, nobody's going to buy that. Because basically it comes down to creating a giant space squid and dropping it on New York. And they're like, no, there's just no way. So they changed the ending to have it be that it's the same kind of gigantic event, except that it's a giant event that destroys most of New York. However, the evil genius pins it on Dr. Manhattan. So they make it look like their equivalent of their Superman, like of this world, who Dr. Manhattan can do. He controls the atomic structure of things, so he can make anything into anything else. Like he can, he's just incredibly ambivalent about everything. So he's like, just doesn't have any interest in anything going on. So it's really hard to get him motivated to do anything. So they make him the bad guy, so everyone is sort of like, oh, we need to stop Dr. Manhattan. And so that's what their premise was. And so that was the major change it did. The other major difference is really the tone, because Alan Moore's sort of premise is superheroes are not a good thing. Like, the fact that these people are dressing up in costumes and beating up on people is not healthy. These people are not heroes. These are just messed up people who are, sort of externalizing their trauma and doing terrible things under a mask. And so Zack Snyder said, yeah, but isn't that awesome? And so he sort of goes from like the action in Watchmen comic is really brutal and not gratuitous in the same way that like 300 is like gratuitous. Like, it's not like big full panel pages of like heads being chopped off and people with glee. I mean, it's really close and intense in small panels, and it's very disturbing and uncomfortable. Zack Snyder's is like slow-mo, shiny, big, like look at like yeah, sure Night Owl might be messed up as a person, but look how cool he looks in his armor punching dudes in the face. Come on. It doesn't quite work as the deconstruction of the superhero myth that I think that Alan Moore was going for. And obviously we have no idea what Alan Moore thinks of it, because he has refused to talk about it, see it, be anything involved in it at all. And everybody just sort of accepts that. But this is the sort of aesthetic that Zack is going to bring to the DC universe. This over-the-top violence, the shininess, the appearance of depth, that sort of the pop culture psychology. I mean, like, I'd say, okay, so this show, I'm not here to bag on Zack Snyder. I'm not here to say like things he's the worst. I'm not here to say he's the best. I'm just trying to, and I'm also not a journalist, so I'm not just reporting on stuff. I am going to put my own commentary on things, but I'm also trying to give you a sense of perspective. So when I'm talking for me, I'm not just talking to me. I'm talking about me, but I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm certainly not speaking for Rob.
We'll see. Yeah, that may be true.
What are your feelings about the Watchmen movie?
Well, it's brutal. I mean, there's parts of it that are so brutal and not what you've seen. I mean, okay, it's probably, I mean, let's say this, it probably is maybe one of the only superhero comic book movie adaptations that has a full-blown encounter scene between a male and female character, right? Like, very true. I mean, it's something. I really danced around that.
You did. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to say something. Shit can get real here because we have an explicit tag.
Oh, so, wait, what?
You do not need to swear if you want to, but yes, this is an explicit podcast because there is going to be explicit language coming up later on. So shit can get real.
Well, they had sex. So like that. I'm so used to that. Oh,
I know, right? This is for an R-rated guy, this is an R-rated podcast.
Okay. So no, I mean, look, all I just know is, and there's a couple scenes from that movie that till this day, like, still resonate with me. Most of them involving Rorschach.
Yes.
I mean, just all of him, pretty much, right? Yeah. So it's a dark movie.
Is probably the best part of that movie.
Oh, yeah.
It was perfectly cast. And I think he survives the translation, I think, extremely well. Like, it seems like he was the the best of all of the stuff, like the best adaptation. Like all his stuff is great, right straight out of the comics. It's almost like line for line, almost. I mean, he was my favorite part of it.
Though, but I'll tell you, like, actually putting it this way, and I'm as I'm listening here, right? Wow, yeah. I can see now how this teased Zack Snyder up to what he does next. Like, wow, you can really see why the first movie that we're going to talk about in regards to all this turned out the way it did. Wow, absolutely. I mean, it's actually not surprising then. I mean,
no, you can follow the trend, and that's the thing is people who thought when he got the big show, when he got to do the big stuff, that he was going to do anything different. Why would he?
Right.
Because like he's shown what he likes and what he does, and he's being celebrated for it. So
this is what he does. This is what he does. Like
he's not going to turn into Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
Like he's charting his own path. Like this is the stuff that he likes and that people seem to like because his movies were making money. Now Watchmen wasn't. I mean, it was a R-rated 3-hour superhero movie, so like it wasn't. It was not Endgame. Like it wasn't going to pull that kind of money, especially back in those times. But it did decently well, and it made its money back, and it continues to generate commentary, obviously, like we're doing right here, and conversations and stuff too. Enough that Watchmen is still relevant enough that they then went on and created a television series of Watchmen. Now. I would say I would highly recommend anybody check out and know that it is not a sequel to this movie.
No.
So that series is not like this. It is contemporary. So like it is that series takes place now-ish. So like I think it was 2019, but it's basically in 2019. But it's following the events of the comic book. So because he was, I'd say 75% faithful to the comic, like you can watch it and then go and watch the television series and kind of know what's going on. But there are events and names and specific things that happened that didn't happen in the movie that did happen in the comic books that are directly relevant to the events of the Watchmen series. And most importantly is Space Squid. Like basically in the Watchmen television series, the Space Squid thing happens and you see it. They actually at one point they visit New York or in a flashback and show you the actual squid. I mean, like they show you that is something that happened. And like squid is a sort of a reference to because when you start out this is not a spoiler because it's in the first episode. When you start out the series, there are shrimp rain. So like basically that there's these weird little tiny squids that are raining from the sky at various points all around the world. And that because they know that it's sort of as a way of saying like, oh yeah, the world has changed and the dimensions are weird and it's still, that threat is still out there. So squid is definitely a part of it. So I would say, I would recommend, see the movie or don't, but definitely if you're interested at all in this material, definitely watch the television series because it is as good as everyone is telling you.
And that is, by the way, both of those, both the film and the TV series, available on HBO Max.
That's true. And if you do decide to watch Watchmen, and like I say, I'm not dissuading you from it. I think it is definitely worth seeing. I would highly recommend seeking out the director's cut. It's in like a lot of these films, what we're finding is that the filmmakers come in with a big story, and then the studio goes, yeah, but we want to sell lunchboxes. Like, so they always break it down. Like, I just had a conversation about Daredevil and the same kind of thing. The Daredevil director's cut is much better when you see the full story. Same thing with Watchmen. They tried to, like, bring it in a more reasonable thing and cut some of the, the smaller elements, and I think it weakens the movie. So if you have a chance to see it, I would recommend see the director's cut. I do not know if that's the one that is streaming, but I know it's out there in the world. I think there's Blu-rays available, and I think you can buy it on iTunes. You can buy both versions. There's also as another thing we're going to see continuing on Zack Snyder, there is an ultimate director's cut of Watchmen as well. I'm not a big fan of that one. And that one he tried to let's see. Well, we're here, so let's get nerdy. So in the original comic, the people of the universe of Watchmen don't like superheroes. Like, superheroes are not like they are sort of in our culture. They're a dominant thing. People go to the movies, you buy the pajamas, you have the action figures, all that stuff. They don't care about superheroes in terms of that way. They love pirates. So pirates are the dominant culture in that universe. So everything that they watch are pirate movies, pirate comics. And so there is a comic book that one of the characters is reading through the entire course of Watchmen, called it's Tales of the Black Freighter, and so it's a horror story but set in a pirate universe, and so at various times they'll cut to someone reading the story, and you'll actually see panels of this comic book that takes place in the universe. They did an animated version of the Tales from the Black Freighter, and then they cut the animated thing into the movie approximately where it goes in those little vignettes. And I don't really care. Like, I mean, I want to see the story of Watchmen. I don't really care about what's going on with this pirate thing, whether it's thematically linked or not. So adding that in just bloats the runtime, and then you go, ugh, another animated thing. I guess, thematically it's supposed to tie into, but I find it just more distracting than anything else. But there you go. So if you have a chance, my recommendation, director's cut. If not that, then the theatrical cut, and then just ignore the whatever ultimate director's cut I think it's called, something like that. But now we're gonna get into the big stuff. Now we're here for the man of the hour, the Tower of Power, the big blue Boy Scout. You know him, you love him.
It's Superman!
Superman rocketed to Earth as an infant when the distant planet Krypton exploded. And who, disguised as Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter for the Daily Planet, fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and freedom with superpowers.
That's right, it's Superman. So that was the theme from The New Adventures of Superman animated series. So let's talk about Superman. So obviously there had been the 4 Superman movies starring Christopher Reeve that had... I would say it was a sliding scale.
Oh, absolutely.
Superman the movie,
right,
from '78 was a huge success. Right. I'm going to tell you a little story and see if it sounds familiar. So they had the same guy direct the sequel, but after the filming was done, they went, "Yeah, we don't really like what you did," and so they removed him. Had another guy come in, use some of the footage and shoot some new stuff, and then put something together and then put it out in theaters. Huh. It's interesting.
It's
almost like history repeating.
Well, but the outcome will be different. So
well, I guess we're going to see.
Well, I guess we're going to. That's why we're here. I got to tell you, I remember. I can remember seeing Superman in the theater as a kid, as a 6-year-old. I remember seeing the sequel. I do think that the sequel is far better. I think it's I really do like the Superman 2. As it's cut, not the Richard Donner version.
The original theatrical cut.
The original theatrical cut. I never knew about the whole backstage shenanigans that, obviously took place until much, much later. I mean, only until about maybe 15 years ago when the Donner cut was made available. Superman 2 is like the classic movie because, and I'm just going to say this, the first Superman movie is amazing. However, the ending is garbage.
Very true. You know what? I actually when I watched it again, so I sat down. I'd say about a year or so ago. I think there was a podcast was going to talk about it, and so I sat down and watched it again, and I realized something I had never realized before. Because Superman the movie starring Christopher Reeve came out in director Richard Donner came out in 1978, I believe.
Right, 78.
Once again, I'm pulling from my memory.
Yep.
So, Rob, what was the dominant popular genre at the time in the late 70s?
78. Well, that would be where I was still searching for Star Wars action figures.
Star Wars is one thing, but yeah. So, like, if you weren't a sci-fi fan, what were you going to see?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I can remember. You know what? I'm going to pull just from my memory. It was Annie and the Muppet movie.
Oh, well, you were a kid. Yeah,
I was a kid.
So let's say I'm leading down a path.
Yeah.
So let's say it's I don't know 75. You're a hip 20-something.
Ooh, yeah.
Out in the town.
Oh, yeah.
You're not gonna. You've seen Saturday Night Fever. You're not gonna see that. Like what is dominating the multiplexes for the last 10 years? What's been the big thing?
Oh, this is a really good question.
Over and over again.
No clue.
Disaster movies.
Oh, airplane, airport.
Exactly.
Towering Inferno.
Towering Inferno, Earthquake. Poseidon Adventure. That had been the dominant thing. When I watch Superman, it's a disaster movie.
Oh, gee, it really is.
Because you have Lex Luthor and stuff too, but everything that he do is earthquakes and fire and Superman's not fighting.
Whoa!
He's fighting earthquakes.
You just blew my mind. Yes.
Right? The same thing happened to me. I watched it. I'm like, this is a disaster movie with a superhero in it.
Oh, wow.
It all made perfect sense. I'm like, of course, because that's like the language of the time. That's what that people understood. Those were the Marvel movies of the time, were disaster movies. Towering Inferno, Poseidon Adventure. Everybody went to see those.
Oh, and
just like those, they got worse and worse and worse as time went on.
Well,
and by the time you get 78, they're pretty much done.
They're done, and also too, what people don't know if you're not familiar with this era of film, they were all like celebrity ensemble casts.
Yes,
they brought in a crazy group of people that you knew, like actors and actresses that you knew. And then, of course, as they went on, because they would probably ask for more money, then they'd have to go to the next tier of actors and actresses. Mm-hmm. And that's, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, you get your A, B, and C last actors. And the thing is, because it's disaster, it's an indiscriminate killer. You never knew who was going to live and who was not. So that was the first one. And you're right, the second one is still a solid movie. It's a little weird at the end, too. Like the cellophane.
The cellophane. Oh, don't think too hard about that. It's fine.
But you have Superman facing off against superpowered Kryptonians,
right,
which is a theme we're going to see here come up very, very quickly. And then Superman 3 comes out, and Superman becomes kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
And he meets Richard Pryor. And there's a terrifying scene of a woman being turned into a robot. It's very, very odd, odd movie.
I'm missing what happens in 4 then. 4 is then.
And 4 is The Quest for Peace.
Oh, that's right.
So that is about nuclear proliferation.
Oh, boy.
So you have Lex Luthor's nephew, played by John Cryer, who creates Nuclear Man.
Oh, no. That's right.
An evil nuclear Superman with a fantastic blonde mullet and really long fingernails. Yeah. I am not making this up.
Nope, you're not.
Also a see-through mesh costume. It really has to be seen to be believed. There's a reason he's never shown up anywhere else.
And they fight on the moon or something, right?
I believe they do.
Yeah.
Yes. And at one point, Superman flies around and takes all the world's nuclear weapons and throws them into space.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Okay. It was not great. It was not well received, and so that was sort of the late 80s, and that was pretty much it for Superman for a while. However, it was still, obviously, Superman is one of the most recognizable characters in the entire world. Like, you could go anywhere and show that S, and people know who it is and what it stands for. So Warner Brothers was hot to make another Superman movie. So finally, they, after a decade of deliberation, they went with a sequel. They decided to go with Bryan Singer, pitched them, what if I continued on the same story from the Donnerverse? I'm going to go back to Superman 2 and make what should have been Superman 3.
Wow, the big retcon. I mean, really.
Yeah, the big retcon. Yeah. Even though it would involve none of the original cast,
right,
a lot of whom had either died or moved on to other things, and he would tell the story of that way. So that was when we got Superman Returns in 2006, starring Brendan Routh. And if anything that we can talk about this, if we, this might go in a negative direction, but thank you, Superman Returns, for giving us Brandon Routh.
Oh, absolutely.
Brandon Routh has been a really, really great addition to the pantheon of superhero actors.
1,000%.
He was a great Superman.
Yes,
and everything he's done in the Arrowverse has been great, and he got to reprise his role as Superman, and he still nailed it. Whatever. 10 years, 15 years later, he still put on the suit and was Superman again.
No, that movie is...
I can't say enough good stuff about Brandon Routh.
Yeah.
However, the movie...
Well, and I mean, and here's the summary I would just say is that, they nailed it. They nailed Superman. They nailed... It is what you would actually think Christopher Reeve Superman would come back from Earth from his little trip right after Superman 2. It's phenomenal. There's some really weird casting problems.
Yeah. So it tells the story of Superman as a deadbeat dad.
Yeah.
Which is an unusual way to go. So the basic premise of the Superman Returns, if you've not seen it, is that at the end of Superman 2, Superman decided to go and see what was happening on Krypton. He was like, I want to see what's left. So he got in basically the pod and flew out to space. So now Superman Returns that's where he's returning from.
Right.
So Superman returns to Earth, and then it's 10 years later?
5.
I guess.
That's 5 years.
5? Is it 5
years
later?
No, I want to say 5. I think it's 5.
No, I would say that the Lois' son is...
Oh, yeah, wait.
So I
Wait,
think it's
what?
I'm gonna say. I say this. I guess I should have my research. We'll say about 10 years. So
Oh
about
no!
10 years he's
no,
gone.
it actually is 5. It actually, I'm really.
It's 5?
Yeah, it's 5.
Is it really 5?
What is that? Doesn't even
Wow,
make
that
sense.
makes no sense at all. Okay, one of the many things in this movie that does not make
That
any
doesn't
sense.
make any sense.
So he comes back and then sort of like tries to reconnect with the world. And of course, that means Clark Kent was also gone for 5 years. And so
interesting.
He tries. I know. It's like well. The guy I was writing about was gone, so what did I have to write about it? It's not like you're going to send me someplace to report on a football game. Who'd send Clark Kent to report on football?
Right.
He comes back and then finds out that Lois is now married and has a kid. But wait. If you do the math on when that kid is... So they're basically retconning it to say that when Superman did his super kiss on Lois in Superman 2... he also made her forget that they had a relationship and that it was a physical relationship.
Well, yeah.
And then we find out that that's actually his
No,
kid.
that may work then, because the idea is that they conceived the child when they were in the aluminum foil bed, right?
Yes,
in
when he was
2.
mortal.
When he was mortal. And then, maybe a couple years happen, and then he takes off, and then he comes back.
Yeah.
And so he's come back. He's been gone 5 years, but he's come back like 8 years later. So that actually,
Yeah,
maybe
okay. All right,
that's the
that
plan.
works.
But she's married to Cyclops. Not cool.
Yep, she's married. That's right.
And I will just say, like, one of the things that did always, whenever I've seen this movie in clips and stuff since I saw it in the theater, Kate Bosworth. Well, totally enjoyed Kate Bosworth. I just didn't see her as Lois Lane, and I had there was an issue with that, and then there's other issues with some of the other characters.
Yeah. I say we don't have to. We're not going to get deep into.
No,
it.
yeah,
It has its own issues, but I mean, obviously there is the actor who should be forgotten and playing Lex Luthor.
Yeah, we won't
Less
worry
said
about
him,
that.
the better. There's a couple. There's some good things in it. I mean, like the effects are really good. I think I will go on a limb and say this is probably the most powerful Superman we'd seen.
Oh,
I mean, like, he is impervious to pretty much everything. I mean, this is the Superman who bounces a bullet off of his eyeball.
and that's cool. Like, that was. Do you remember when they showed the trailers for this?
I do. You know, I have a weird connection to this movie because the first and only San Diego Comic-Con I went to, I got into Hall H, and they did a presentation on Superman Returns and showed what Bryan Singer referred to as a tone poem. He's like, it's not a trailer, it's a tone poem.
Oh, my God.
And it showed a bunch of, like, just unrelated clips sort of set to, like, this sort of generic-y music, kind of just, here's what I've been shooting, because he was in Australia shooting.
Right.
And at the time, he flew over to do this, and then he flew back. And so that was one of the things that they showed. One of the first things they showed was that was a big special effects sequence that they added in to show, you know, how powerful Superman was, and that somebody opens on him with like an M60, like and you see the bullets just bouncing off, and they show a close up slow mo. There's slow motion again, more speed ramping.
Right.
Hit his eyeball and deform and fall to the ground, like it basically just like bounces off.
Something you had never seen before. You had never seen that portrayed in real action in Superman.
Right.
Yeah, it's a
so,
conflicted movie.
I mean, he lifts like, you know, like an almost entire continent. I think.
Right.
I mean, he was really at the height of his like you know powers. That didn't work. Like people basically like didn't really. And once again, it's like most of these things. It does okay, but it doesn't set the world on fire. Like it's not well regarded by everyone. It's just one of those things. Like, oh well, they just don't know how to do Superman. And that really is the truth. The Warner Brothers did not know what they wanted. And so they basically went out to all the people in sort of the late 2000s who were sort of movers and shakers and said, what do you got? They like basically like opened the floodgates. Like, tell us what you would do with Superman. So they got pitches from J.J. Abrams, from Grant Morrison, from Mark Waid, from Jeff Johns, from Brad Meltzer, Mark Miller, and Matthew Vaughn. That actually one got really close. They actually proposed a like trilogy of movies, like telling like the whole story, so like this big epic sweeping story, and so obviously Matthew Vaughn went on to make Kick-Ass and Kingsman and stuff too, so he's doing okay. But they just could not find the pitch that would be interesting to them, and so they were doing it. But then another little wrinkle came into the situation that made it so they had to make a decision. They had to make it quick. So in August of 2009, there was a court ruling that said Jerry Siegel, so Siegel and Schuster are the guys who created Superman, but they did it under work for hire. And so they basically had to sell their, to make a to live, they had to like sell their rights to Superman when they were broke. And so Warner Brothers owned it. And then there's been a long battle saying that because they created him, they should be seeing some of the billions and billions of dollars that Superman has brought into Warner Brothers. And so there's been all these ongoing legal things. So at the time, the family recaptured 50% of the rights to Superman's origin, their share of the copyright of Action Comics #1, which is where most of Superman's mythology comes from. The judge said Warner Brothers did not owe the families additional royalties from the previous films. However, if they did not begin production on a Superman film by 2011, then the Siegel estate would have been able to sue for lost revenue for the unproduced film. Ooh. So it was kind of a pay-for-play thing. Like, basically, they were going to have to write a giant check for a Superman-sized movie that didn't exist if they didn't put one today. So all of a sudden, it became, all right, we want the perfect pitch. It was like, oh, we want the best pitch, like just something right now. Like, who's got something right now? And so they didn't have to look very far. They went to Christopher Nolan. So Christopher Nolan had been making the Batman trilogy that we know for them right there. And so they said, like, look, you know superheroes, like, what have you got? And so they signed him on as a producer to put something together. So he listened to the pitches, and the one he liked best was from David S. Goyer. And so David S. Goyer had helped co-write Batman Begins. He had written most of the Blade trilogy. So he sort of like had the comic book mojo. Like he was sort of like, we thought of him as one of us. Like he was, a nerd made good. But then, okay, so they've got the pitch, which we'll get into, and then they've got the producer, but they still don't have a director. So they went out to, as far as I can tell, everyone. The names that have definitely come out have been Mick G, because Mick G was still hot off of Charlie's Angels at the time. Guillermo del Toro, Robert Zemeckis, Ben Affleck, actually, as a director, they went to. Duncan Jones, who would go on to make the Warcraft movie. Matt Reeves, who's currently making The Batman. Even Tony Scott. And nobody wanted to take on this project. Nobody wanted to be the one to do Superman.
Did they go to Kevin Smith? No Kevin Smith.
that happens around in that time too, in the weird in between time.
Right.
Kevin Smith was one of the things that got pretty close. I didn't even want to get into.
No, I'm kidding.
Nick Cage.
Totally,
Kevin Smith.
That's been done. Yeah.
You could do a podcast series about what didn't happen with Superman.
Right.
So I was trying to just sort of stay as much as we can, but. I highly recommend, if you're a Kevin Smith fan, find the story he tells about writing a Superman movie. It is fascinating, and it shows you a different side of Hollywood where, like, what we're learning is executives have no idea what they want. No. And they make really, really bizarre choices.
Well, and just something to note is, so, as we're talking about this, keep in mind, Batman Begins 2005, The Dark Knight 2008. Yep. So Christopher Nolan's, and by the way,
he's white hot.
He's white hot. And also Dark Knight Rises 2012, which means we're almost 10 years away from The Dark Knight Rises, which is insane.
Yes. So that was in the future. So like he is riding high off of Dark Knight. Everybody went, like at that time, best comic book movie ever.
Well, and everybody said at that point, what's next? They were. I remember people like, okay, what's the next trilogy we can do? Because what he had done with Batman.
So it makes perfect sense. I mean, like from a management, you take a known quantity, like they know what they're going to get with Christopher Nolan, and so like they put him in charge of it, and so he and David S. Goyer then decide on our boy. So like, so Zack Snyder then gets the nod and basically then proceeds to rework the entire story. So he had very different ideas of what they wanted to do. So with David Goyer and Christopher Nolan, the three of them combined to tell the story. And so Rob, if you would be so kind, would you give us a synopsis of the film Man of Steel?
Okay, first of all, let me just say, I will just tell you, a brilliant title. Because here's the deal.
Yes.
I think when they did this, that was the first thing they did right, and in the theme of Batman Begins, right? Not a typical Batman title. So
it actually takes its name from the John Byrne miniseries that he did, which sort of was its own reboot of Superman, because it used to be that it was Superman pretending to be Clark Kent, but John Byrne said, no, Clark Kent is the guy, and he becomes Superman for when he needs to, but he's always Clark Kent, which is a very different approach than we had seen in the past. So it was very much of a he's a farm boy from Kansas who's pretending to be a superhero as opposed to a distant alien who pretends to be human. The Quentin Tarantino version of the story of like, this is his version, like what he thinks humans are. It was a very much grounded kind of story. But that's pretty much all it takes.
Oh yeah,
from that is just the title, because that's not how Zack Snyder took the story.
So here we go. Let's see if I miss anything. All right, we start with Krypton. Krypton is going to go boom due to too much mining, which is interesting. Zod, we all know Zod. General Zod, he kills Jor-El. He's banished to the Phantom Zone with his minions. Krypton goes boom, and Kal-El lands in Kansas and is raised as Clark by Jonathan and Martha Kent. He has a tough childhood. He has a tough adulthood, and Clark becomes a good-natured wanderer. Meanwhile, journalist Lois Lane goes to check out an alien ship, which turns out to be a Kryptonian scout ship, in the Arctic, and guess what? Clark's there. He sneaks into the ship, meets his AI dad, learns everything, and saves Lois when things go boom. Lois decides to keep his secret safe from the world after learning how St. Joseph died while Jesus watched. Wait, hold on. That's wrong note. Sorry.
I think you switched a name.
I switched a story there. Okay. You understand what I'm saying? Zod escapes. Zod escapes the Phantom Zone, comes to Earth, tells the world, "Hey, hand over Kal-El," while he hatches a plan to reform the Earth with his world engine. Watch the Star Trek reboot to understand how that works, and repopulate it with a master Kryptonian race based on genetic key taken from Clark and Kryptonian technology. Superman cooperates with the U.S. military to stop him sending his minions back to the Phantom Zone and putting an end to his plan, but not before a no-holds-barred battle ensues in the streets of Metropolis, ending with Superman killing Zod to save a family. Clark takes on his identity as Superman and his secret identity as a freelance reporter for the Daily Planet to stay close to the news and a girl. End scene. How was that?
That was pretty good. You only left out one important thing.
Uh-oh.
Skybeam.
Well, I mean, yeah, the military helps. I put,
another Skybeam. That's going to be your recurring thing. That's the thing.
The Skybeam.
Yeah.
What about this movie, boy?
It's complicated. So I would say I have some stuff I want to talk about, but I know that this is one of the things where our opinions differ, because you are a fan of this movie and I am not a fan of this movie.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about what the good points are in your opinion. Like, I'm not saying defend it to me. I'm just saying, like, tell me like the things that you think are awesome about Man of Steel.
So here's the deal. This is my general view on the movie, is that one, Marvel's established at this point, right? 2013. They've got a bunch of movies in the can. Okay, their genre is clicking.
Yeah.
The key part I remember when I saw this movie was you can't out Marvel. Meaning, if you're going to try and copy the form of Marvel, meaning, you know, good action with a lot of levity scattered around, and, you know, and yes, for the most part, happy endings, everything works out. Well, it's just, you're just copying Marvel. And I think that I appreciated the desire or the intent to say, hey, look, we're going to go a different direction. Now, I also enjoy, and here's the deal. I actually really, not because it's okay, and we're going to differ, and I can get poo-pooed for this.
Yeah.
Because I do in another day job I have, because I do teach religion, I do like using some of the clips of this movie as a Judeo-Christian connection to certain things. Because let me just tell you something, whatever faith you, or none at all, whatever our dear listeners have, they really, I will tell you something. It's not just he went all in trying to make Kal-El the Jesus. He went all in on making Jonathan Kent St. Joseph. Like in ways that I really don't think people fully understand. Now, is that good for Superman? No, it's not. I'm in full agreement on that. Is it good if I wanted to have some cool clips to play, teaching about something? Yes. I mean, there is, and I will tell you this. I mean, here's my last thing. I really enjoyed the music. I really, really do love the theme. I love the sounds of this movie. And I will say that the death of Jonathan Kent in the movie, that whole sequence, just separate it from Superman. just as a moment of sacrifice of a character for the benefit of another, I think it was spectacularly well done. Like, I really still love that. And I love the scenes of Clark when his flashbacks of all the different times that he was bullied and how he used restraint in those moments and everything else. Like, there's a scene that I love where he's in a classroom and he's just getting his powers of sense.
Yeah.
And to see that type of experience, and then his mother's the one who comes in to be his rock. Those were things that you had never seen portrayed in Superman, and I do appreciate that stuff. Is it all appropriate? No, it's not. That's all I got.
You talked about it, I was gonna leave this for later, but let's talk about the religious imagery, because it's not it's like a lot of times people put stuff onto movies that were never intended to be there. This is not that case. This was 100% intended. Like, how old is Superman in this movie?
Oh, like
Clark. How old is Clark in this movie?
I'd say he's in his 30s, right?
Yeah, he's 33, Rob.
Oh no.
Yeah,
oh no.
He's
33?
He's 33.
Well,
yeah.
And people understand that is believed to be the death.
Jesus was.
The age of Jesus, right?
So I found a quote from Zack Snyder talking about specifically the religious imagery, because there is a lot of religious
my
imagery.
God, it's filled.
Beyond that, I mean, there's the fact that when he is about to have his this big confrontation, where does he go? He goes to church.
Yes.
And he meets with, and like you say the door, and like the framing of it is the priest is sitting down and Clark is standing up, so he has to look up at him to do that with the light behind him. And behind Clark's shoulder is a stained glass image of Jesus praying to God in the garden.
Well, no, I mean like that sequence. Okay, let me just put a little thing here. That is a sequence where Kal-El is agonizing over his decision. Do I turn myself over to the Romans?
Take this cup away.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus Christ, Superstar, man. No, like that's that whole sequence. And what's the image behind him? An image of the biblical portrayal of Jesus, his agony in the garden, the night of the Last Supper. Like, well, I mean, that can't be clearer.
It cannot be clear. And so I found this quote. That this is when Zack Snyder did an interview with CNN talking about the religious imagery. And he says, "When we started to examine the Superman mythology in the most classic sense, I really wanted to press upon the film the why of him, which has been 75 years in the making. The Christ-like parallels, I didn't make that stuff up. We weren't like, hey, let's add this. That stuff is there in the mythology. That is the tried and true Superman metaphor. So rather than trying to be snarky and say that doesn't exist, we thought it would be fun to allow that mythology to be woven throughout."
Oh, wait. Even I'm a little offended by that.
Yeah.
Wait.
Because
what?
Okay, so and the marketing department of Warner Brothers also leaned into this. They created a whole section of the Man of Steel website about the Superman as Christ metaphor, including a downloadable PDF you could get called Jesus, the First Superhero.
Oh, even Jesus would be disappointed to hear that.
Yeah. And like there's I mean, we could go on about this. I mean, there's the scene where after he rejects the thing and gets thrown into space, he falls out of the ship and he goes into a very familiar T pose as he's falling. So I mean, these were 100% intentional.
Well,
it was just text. It wasn't subtext.
Oh,
it was text.
No, my God. I mean, you can't. Well, and one, you could go to the whole thing about. When I make the funny thing about Jonathan and St. Joseph, that is clearly there. I mean, absolutely clear. His whole death, because if you study anything about the belief is that St. Joseph dies somewhere between Jesus' 12th and 30th birthday. That's why he's no longer in the New Testament, right? Well, that's what happens. And the idea is there's been, talk about this and theologians about, Jesus could have saved him. And St. Joseph was like, no, it's not your time yet. That's literally what happens in the movie. When you also have, I'll even just make this one last point about how there's no way he can say that's not true. The scene where where Superman has given himself over to the military, they're in the interrogation room with Lois. He says it flat out. I am handing myself over to you. I'm offering myself over as a surrender. I'm not surrendering to Zod. I'm surrendering to mankind. Like, that's another way of explaining that. If you believe in that, that explains that. And then when she says, what's the deal with the S? Oh, it's not an S. On my world, it means hope. Well, on here, it's an S. The cross was an instrument of humiliation. Like, that whole line is a direct connection to that. No, you can't say that.
Yeah.
No.
But here's the thing. They really forced this on it, and I think they really like pushed this metaphor hard because it honestly, as someone who's read Superman comics for a long time and looked for this stuff, there really isn't a Superman Jesus connection.
No,
there is a Superman religious connection.
Yes,
but it's not Jesus. It's like, and I'm not the first person to point this out, but folks, he's Moses.
Yeah, wrong testament.
Superman is space Moses.
Yeah,
he was taken from his people, put in a boat / egg, sent down the river to be raised by people who are not his own, and then later in his life he finds out where he actually comes from, and he decides to serve the people that he is with. He's Moses. Like, if you have to put a religious thing on it, that was. And also, Siegel and Schuster were both very good Jewish boys.
Yes.
His name is Kal-El.
Yes.
That's Hebrew.
Like the L. I mean, have anybody's ever noticed angels? Angel, Michael, Kal-El. Like,
Kal-El.
that's it.
Yes. So if you have to, and there's no reason you should, but if you have to put religious things on him, he's Moses.
Yeah.
Every time I see Superman as Jesus, I'm like, you're looking in the wrong side of the Bible.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy.
No, okay. So how much do you think, and I can remember when I saw it, I mean, I did love it. I enjoyed it because, again, for the main things I said at the beginning was that it's different. It was a different take. You're trying to come at this from a different angle, right? And I understand that.
I have some serious problems with this movie and their portrayal of Superman. And, okay, so what you'd think it would be is the fact that I was a Superman fan, had read the comics, and it's different, and I don't like it. And, okay, fine. However, over the course of the time, by the time I got to this movie, I'd seen a dozen versions of Superman.
Right.
Like, I mean, I watched the original George Reeves thing. Like, they were still on television. They would do it. I'd seen Christopher Reeve. I'd seen Superman the Animated Series in '96. I'd seen the Superboy series from the '80s. You know what I mean? Like, I'd seen Lois and Clark. I'd seen Smallville. Like, I had seen many Super Friends, Superpowers, the Batman Superman Hour. I mean, like, I had seen many versions of Superman. But something about this one just was so wrong to me, that he just was so different that I didn't recognize him as being Superman. And I couldn't articulate it. So I did some research and I sort of found something that made me understand it a little better. So I'm gonna go through sort of what I discovered and then read some of the stuff that I found. And obviously this is how I interpret it, what's discomforting to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm not gonna say that this is the definitive truth and this is what it is. I'm just saying, like, on my just internal thing of like why this movie fundamentally bothers me in the way that other things don't. I mean, I've seen multiple versions of lots of heroes. There's lots of different Batmans out there, and there's some I prefer and some I don't. But there's something about this one that just rubs me the wrong way. I'm not the only one, but I'm also not the voice of the majority or of all people. So there's a book by Glenn Weldon called Superman, the Unauthorized Biography. I highly recommend it. He's also written one about Batman. It's called The Cape Crusader. It's very, very good because he talks about these characters through the ages. He talks about their original inception and how these characters change with the times. And he talks about what's going on in the nation versus that. I mean, if any book inspired this podcast, it would be these two books. So in it, he says, Superman changes as our culture changes. The only thing about him, in fact, that has remained untouched, inviolate, since Action Comics #1 hit the stands in April 1938 is his motivation. That motivation is at once the simplest of them and the hardest to unpack. He is a hero. Specifically, 1, he puts the needs of others over himself, and 2, he never gives up. These are his 2 most essential attributes, the elements that make a Superman story a Superman story. And that is the beginning of the problem I have with this, because this is the most selfish Superman in history. So I started to unpack that. Like, where does that come from? Why is he like this? And then I started looking into Zack Snyder and what his sort of philosophy. And I'm not going. No, I'm going to talk about some stuff, and I'm not putting anything on Zack Snyder. I've never met the man. I have never, read detailed biographies of him. I just know what he has talked about publicly and what he likes. And one of the things that he is very, very interested in is Ayn Rand and objectivism. He wants to make a movie about objectivism too. And so when you look at that, and I found a really, really interesting article online called Man is an End in Himself, an objectivist analysis of Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. And I read this and it sparked with me. So I'm going to read you some of this stuff from this website, and then like in the show notes, you'll find the link to it. You can read the whole thing. The guy's very well researched, and so I'm just going to pull some stuff out there. So let's talk about Dear Old Dad. Now, we've seen several different Pa Kents over the years. We've seen sort of in the original Superman, the 78 Superman, much older man, and obviously he dies of a heart attack, and that Clark learns that he can't save everyone, and so that's the lesson in it. We've seen the sort of down-home wisdom of Jonathan Kent on Smallville over the course of years, like always being the supportive dad, trying to help his son as much as he could. So and there's the sort of octogenarian ones on the animated series that don't really have anything to do, just sort of like, you can do it, Clark. I mean, they're not really relevant to the thing. We see they're just good down-home people. But this Clark, this Pa Kent, this Jonathan, is very, very different. So I'm going to read some of from this article. So Snyder's Jonathan is hard, tough, and especially stoic. In two key scenes, he instills in Clark several non-traditional Superman values: apathy, and the necessity of extreme individualism and prioritizing self-interest. First, when a preteen Clark saves a bus of children, which he was also aboard, Jonathan scolds him for using his powers and suggests that protecting Clark's identity is more important than the lives of imperiled children. Clark: what was I supposed to do? Just let them die? Jonathan: maybe, but there's more at stake here than our lives or the lives of those around us. This is explicitly teaching him to defy his instinct of altruism. Even from the first trailer, when they show that scene, I was like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
What did he say?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember like even the other fans who were geeks going, whoa, what? There's got to be more to that. They have to be just editing it weird. Like, no, that's full on what he intended.
Right.
So he goes on in the article. Furthermore, Jonathan consistently uses the information of Clark's differences to isolate and alienate him from his classmates, as well as any potential future he may have adjusting to human life beyond the farm. Henceforth, instead of inspiring the expected humility, compassion, and empathy, traits commonly associated with Superman, the Kents contribute to the formation of the new Superman's identity, incorporating the values of indifference and apathy, extreme individualism, prioritization of self and personal preference, and superiority, supplemented with feelings of isolation and alienation. That is quite a cocktail to put into the mind of the most powerful being on the planet. So what does that mean then? So when you take all of that and then you send that out, so when he becomes Superman, then it becomes an act of defiance against everything he's done. So he's then filled with self-loathing about it. I mean, you talked about him as the helpful wanderer. Well, yeah, except that a woman's being abused in front of him. He walks away, leaving her there, wrecks the guy's truck, and leaves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So he takes, okay, so like the guy really does comeuppance, except that he could just walk back in and continue to abuse that woman. So did you really help in anything?
No, because
anyway,
no, that's a great point. Because when that scene, when that scene happens in the movie, I always think, how much more enraged is that guy going to be now?
Right.
That guy's he is going to completely lose it. Like,
yeah, because Clark is long gone.
He's gone. Yes.
So
it's not wrong.
So when you take all this and you get to the final battle, you know, when it's like it's final, and say I didn't even talked about like, you know, him and Zod. That's not, like, we're not even talking about that. I'm talking about like how he goes about it.
Right.
And we can continue on the religious metaphor of how he descends into the darkness on the other side of the planet to come and then comes back.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so continue on in the article. So, moreover, while the ashes of buildings and human bodies rain down upon Metropolis, Superman removes himself from the battle to lock lips with Lois Lane in the midst of a charred and demolished block of the city. In the selected scenes and throughout Man of Steel, Snyder presents a Clark Superman who pursues only his own superior self-interest, prioritizes his own goals, safety, and any person he prefers, Martha Kent, Lois Lane, and expresses indifference and a lack of empathy towards human suffering and mass death for which he is arguably responsible. This is my problem. I don't recognize this guy as Superman because he doesn't act like Superman. Sure, he punches the supervillains, but he's not acting in a way to help anybody else except himself.
It is
and those he prefers.
Right. It is a dark. I mean, no, and wow. I mean that's very deep. The whole objectivism part. I mean,
right, exactly. I mean, like I say, like, am I saying this is 100% it is? Well,
no, but
I say, like, when you look at it this way, you can see this was the deliberate choice that they made.
Absolutely.
About how they wanted the psychology of their Clark to be.
So did they all want flawed? Was the plan of we're just going to have all flawed characters?
Yes, it was basically the feet of clay. It was basically like they cannot fathom, and this is a common problem with people who try to write Superman. They cannot fathom someone who is altruistic and wants things to be good and is in nature good.
Right.
It's just like no, he has to be flawed and conflicted. It's like no, Superman is not Batman. He's not damaged. He's not internally. He wants to do the right thing by nature. Well, and this is what about so then that leads up to the Zod killing. So they say, well, Superman killed in the comics. Yeah, he did a lot of stuff in the comics. He also did super ventriloquism, but you didn't put that in the movie. But their idea of morality, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about specifically, is he only learns he shouldn't kill after he kills someone. That was their thought. And I would like to remind the audience, let the jury notice that the same writer who wrote that scene is the one who wrote the scene on the tram in Gotham that said, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you. Like, this guy, David Goyer, is obsessed with superheroes killing because allowing someone to die is pretty much the same thing.
It's the same thing.
So,
I mean, yeah.
So for this situation, they wanted to have that thing of like, oh, he has to learn not to kill by murdering someone. So they reverse justify. They're like, let's put him in a situation where he has to kill someone, and they create up that scene and then wrote everything backwards to justify it. So it wasn't like they got to the end of their story. They're like, oh no, it has to. This is the only way you can do it. No, they went. We have to get him to a point where he has to murder a dude. How are we going to do that? Okay, then we'll build it backwards.
Oh,
and that's David Goyer basically said that on, I believe it was the Empire podcast when he talked about it. It was always there, like, and that was actually, they had to go to Christopher Nolan and say Batman's going to murder a guy, and Christopher Nolan was like, no, he's not, and they had to convince him, no, this will be great, people will love it. And you know what?
Well, they
don't, and they're still angry about it. Like, they're still talking about it. So this is my problem with Superman killing is Superman shouldn't need to kill because he's Superman. He can always find a way.
Well, okay. Now let me say this. Two things. First of all, that's really good. I mean, that's a good analysis of that. And let me say that there are elements of this that, they don't fit the religious narrative, right? I mean, like, obviously, I mean, it was being highly selective, which is funny because those flaws, and I think are incredibly well articulated. Why would you then go all in on like the Jesus thing? If you're going to have those flaws, I mean, that's a real contradiction, right? Like, I mean,
because like none of these things describe Jesus.
Yeah, no, that's
like,
all.
Where's Clark turning the other cheek?
Yeah, this is all. No, this is all wrong. That's all wrong, right? And again, and yes, you focus on that, and I always think that's that scene where where isn't it the scene like after he saves the kids on the school bus, and the woman, the neighbor, comes and she says, "Oh, this is Providence or something," and like, and it's like, well, yeah, but then you hear the conversation with his stepdad, and you're like, well, what is happening? Anyway, here's my question. The killing, when he kills Zod.
Yeah.
What would you have done? Okay, if you were going to have that situation play out, obviously the key answer is don't have it play out the way it did. But if you had it play out the way they had, what would you have done?
Well, I mean, Superman has pretty much any power you want to give him. So he could have been anything. He could have poked the guy's eyes out. I mean, if you're gonna go the brutal route, but flying up, flying down, super spin. I mean, freeze breath. I mean, he can do all these things. Like, oh wait, they had established that. Well, so what? Like, you could have easily just as reverse justified that. You could have had him freeze Zod's face, and he can't. I mean, it's Superman.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen him move planets. I mean, there's no limit to the amount of stuff they can do. It's only limited by the imagination of the writers.
But then, do you see then?
He used to be able to create a small duplicate of himself in his hand, a 6-inch version of Superman. Like, the amount of powers that Superman has had,
Right.
is like the list is unbelievably long. So they're only limited by what serves the story, and this is the story that they wanted to serve.
But is there a payoff? Like, I mean, having him take this journey, this arc, and obviously we're going to talk about this.
Yes.
Does it pay off?
I guess we're going to see. I mean, like, basically, they're setting this up very deliberately.
Right.
So before we move on, I have a sort of closing for this. But before we move on, there's a certain amount of like not my Superman, and okay, fine.
Right.
But the thing is, there are because Superman is such a dominant force in culture. There are lots of analogs to this. So if you wanted to take Superman and make him incredibly vain and raised by the state to be a super celebrity, well, then you've got Homelander. If you wanted to have it be that he is like basically, okay, so how about if he came to Earth and he is actually the vanguard of an alien invasion fleet? The Kryptonians are coming and he's the first one here. Well, then you've got Ultraman.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you got Omni-Man. Oh. If you want to make him like, what if he's just super evil? Well, there's Ultraman. Well, what if he is? My take on Superman is, what if he is like completely unmoored by morality because he was raised by the government and now he doesn't believe in the government? Well, then that's Hyperion. I mean, like, you have other characters who can do this kind of stuff. I mean, because they've already been done.
Well,
so
but
you don't need to change this character because there are already characters out there who can do this kind of stuff, and it's fine. Homelander murders people in the first episode. He like annihilates a dozen people. There you go. Then you've got your Superman killing people. That's really what you want.
Now, okay, and
you don't have to have Superman do it.
Well, but now all those names you just mentioned don't have the pop culture resonance that Superman does. Right?
True.
Like, I mean, like, so
it's like this is the bring down your idols. This is.
Do you know what's amazing?
Like,
no,
bring him low.
I hate to pull this card. I did not think I was going to pull this card, but I am going to pull this card on this one. It makes you realize what lucky bastards over at Marvel they were to bring the Iron Man character full. You know what I mean? Like. Mm-hmm. You were able to bring that character up to where that character could play that kind of role, like in different. Like, you just had a better way to tell the story.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to the end of Man of Steel, and you have Superman taking a drone and dropping it in front of the general, and being like, "You shouldn't be spying on me," and like, "Don't worry, I'll be around." As like the audience member, I'm like, I'm terrified of that guy. I 100% am like, I don't trust him at all. I am terrified of the fact that there is a Superman out there who serves no country, can do whatever he wants, and is out there just indiscriminately destroying buildings and stuff too. Like, he's not. I didn't think anything heroic about him at all at the end. I was like, but I don't think that was a mistake because I'm not the only one that felt that way.
Oh, right.
Because as we get to our next movie, it turns out somebody else has the exact same thought processes. And so let's listen in on a conversation between the two of them now.
I am a man of justice. I am a man of might.
I am a man of vengeance. I am a man of the night. You're such a sycophantic sucker. How can you call yourself a man? You say you fight for truth and justice? I say you're working for the man.
You line your mask with lead, but I can see into your soul. I see a scared little boy behind the cape and the cowl.
Fuck you, I'm gonna kick your ass. Fuck you,
I'm taking you down.
Fuck you,
You you wanna be the man, you got to be the man. I'm gonna show you what it means to be a man.
So,
My God.
that was from Holy Musical Batman by the brilliant geniuses over at StarKid. And if you're a Batman fan, if you're a Superman fan, if you're just a fan of really good musicals, it's on YouTube streaming for free. And I highly recommend it. Obviously, it's for adults, as I hope we all are here. But it's really, really funny. Man of Steel comes out and is a moderate success. It has controversy and stuff too, but a bunch of people go to see it all around the world because it's a big Superman movie, and there's a certain thing that goes along with, if there's a new Superman movie, you should go see it. And so people did. And it was enough that they justified a sequel. So they started developing it. But just one sequel isn't enough. Oh no, not when you look over across at the other side of the aisle and you see that this whole universe is forming and everybody's loving going on there. So in October of 2014, DC announces the DC Extended Universe. So they announced a slate of 10 movies that are going to come out over the next couple years and do it. So here's the list that in October 2014 they said was going to happen. So the first movie they said was not, in fact, Man of Steel 2, but was now Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And that would be followed by Suicide Squad, an adaptation of a team of supervillains who work for the government. That would also arrive in 2016. In 2017, we would have Wonder Woman, who was going to debut in Batman vs. Superman. In 2017, after Wonder Woman, would also be Justice League Part 1. In 2018, we would get the Flash movie starring Ezra Miller. He would also be showing up for the first time in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. In 2018, we would have Aquaman starring Jason Momoa, and stop if you've heard this one, he would also be showing up for the first time in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. In 2019, we would get Shazam, the movie, starring Dwayne Johnson as Black Adam. In 2019, we would find Justice League Part 2. And then in 2020, we would get Cyborg, starring Ray Fisher, who would also be making his debut in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And then in 2020, 9 years after their first attempt, we would get the Green Lantern movie.
Oh, jeez. When was this announcement made?
That was made in October of 2014.
Now, perspective. That would be 2 months after the release of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And that's when they probably realized we're a mess. Because think about this. Your Guardians of the Galaxy comes out. That followed Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Thor: The Dark World, we don't have to talk about that. Iron Man 3, which has its faults, but made a ton of money.
Right. Aside from Thor: The Dark World, which made a bunch of money.
Right.
Marvel's on a hot streak.
Yes.
I mean, like, every movie that comes out is like beloved and making a ton of money.
They've already had the full Avengers. This is and you knew Age of Ultron is in production. So like they felt incredibly pressured. They wanted to put all the ingredients in the blender. They wanted to hit puree. They wanted it. They wanted
the MCU. They wanted it now. They wanted to get into this business immediately. God. And it's interesting because, like I said, Man of Steel, even when it came out, was not beloved, was not highly regarded. It did decent, but everybody who sort of came out was like, yeah, okay. Like,
interesting.
Right. And
interesting.
It was sort of like, upon this rock you will build your church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's sand. That's all sand. No.
Man of Steel is a little bit shifting sand.
No,
but that was their intention. And so we did get some of those movies. Obviously, we did get Suicide Squad. We got Wonder Woman at the time. We got a Justice League movie, which obviously we're going to talk about that. The Flash movie has still not shown up. I believe they're on their fifth set of directors.
Yeah.
Aquaman did show up a little later than they thought. Shazam did show up. Justice League Part 2 never happened. Cyborg movie is definitely not going to happen. And the Green Lantern movie, I believe, is now scuttled because there is now a Green Lantern television series that's going to be on HBO Max.
Oh, well, there you go.
So Man of Steel 2 was in development. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do. What is the sequel to Man of Steel? And the more they talked about it, the more they realized, it'd be kind of cool to bring Batman into this. And so that idea got bigger and bigger, and they sort of couldn't let it go. And then so that became Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And so they brought in a brand new writer to help David Goyer to sort of vision this. Someone who they thought could handle like a big ensemble things. His name is Chris Terrio. Do you know what else Chris Terrio is most famous for writing?
What is he most famous for writing?
Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, as much anticipation, including some major hype that built out of San Diego Comic-Con, on March 19th, 2016, we got to see Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Rob, would you be so kind as to synopsize that movie for us?
All right, here we go. Flashback. Batman is born in an alley in Gotham. Might I add, actually, one of the most comic-inspired versions of this, but I digress. 18 months after the battle between Zod and Superman, Bruce Wayne is concerned that Superman sucks. However, Clark, having learned about Batman's form of justice, thinks Batman sucks. Little do they know, Lex Luthor thinks they both suck and wants them to agree. The game is afoot where political sabotage ends up with Diana Prince, yes, that Diana Prince, stealing meta-human data, Bruce stealing kryptonite, and Superman stealing hope by allowing Congress to be destroyed by a bomb. Batman is ready to take on Superman, Luthor takes Martha Kent and Lois, and Diana tries to take a plane somewhere else. But don't worry, Superman and Batman fight, they realize they have the same mom, Batman goes to save Martha while Superman goes to break the neck of Lex. Luthor's got a backup plan. Lex has made a crazy abomination from the corpse of Zod and Kryptonian science. It looks like doomsday for all our characters. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. By the way, Wonder Woman, who's really pissed off an entire plane of fellow passengers because they were leaving, and she was just like, I gotta go! Sorry!
You hate that guy.
You're that person! They take on the monster and they win, though not without losing Superman. Superman is buried. Clark Kent is buried. But fortunately, Clark Kent's open casket wake is next to a window of his childhood home where rays from a yellow sun begin a resurrection process that we see the beginning elements of as Lois Lane drops dirt on his coffin and the particles begin to levitate. And that's it.
All right. And, of course, don't forget, Skybeam.
Skybeam. I mean,
one minor point. They have the same. Their mothers have the same name.
No,
the same mother.
I was being stupid. Stupid. No, I know they're not the same.
It's a very, very important point.
No, let me just say something. Emotionally, they have the same mother because that's kind of what they said, which we'll get into why that's ridiculous and was destroyed in a later movie. But whatever. No, I know. Now, I didn't use, and I could have put in a little bit more about. There's a director's cut that goes a lot deeper into an African subplot. I didn't get into that.
Right.
I was like,
So we can talk about that too because so just to put my cards on the table, I do not like Man of Steel. I actually hope I never have to watch it again. I did not watch it in terms of this. I just but I really like Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and especially I really like what's called the Ultimate Edition, which is the director's cut.
Right.
I did watch it again in anticipation of this podcast, and I really enjoyed it again. Like it is very, very Zack Snyder, which is like a lot of serious people being serious and slow-mo and all this stuff, and like a lot of really important people being really important. Nobody smiles. I mean, like it's very, everything is grim and serious. But it's fine. It works for the story that he's telling. I think mostly it works for me on an emotional level because I am 100% in Batman's corner. Like, as far as I'm concerned, Batman is the hero of the story and Superman is the villain. Because, like, all the way through, I am with Batman in all of his concerns and his worries about what... Now, obviously... we learn that they're both being manipulated by both ends, and then that becomes much clearer, the depths of the machinations when you see the director's cut. But I still really, really enjoy it, even for as pretentious as it can be.
Yes.
And then we start to understand the differences because of the way that Man of Steel was set up. Then it's very easy to dislike this Superman because he's not like the jovial, happy kind of guy. So as they go through, you are very much like, oh yeah, maybe Bruce Wayne is actually onto something. Maybe he's not just being a paranoid guy. Like maybe he's really onto something. The weirdest part to me of this movie is not Lex Luthor, but is Diana Prince. Like, I don't get what she's actually doing.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
So she finds out Lex has a picture of her, and that's her whole motivation for the movie is finding this picture. Like, okay, like, why is that important to you? Because like, it's the internet age. Like, if he scans it, then everybody can have it. So
yeah, I mean, there's no way around it, right?
And the thing is, she doesn't get the picture. Like, that's the whole thing. Her whole she has one quest in this movie is to get this picture back, and she doesn't get it back. Batman gets it back and gives it to her in another movie.
Right.
It's so weird. I mean, I understand this was her first thing, and they were setting it up for the thing, and that's fine. We'll talk about Wonder Woman, the movie, when we get there. But her in this movie does not jibe with any other Wonder Woman thing that we've seen.
Because, I mean, she's tacked on.
Yes, absolutely.
She's tacked on. I mean, no, I mean, that's... Look, here's the thing. I agree with you 100%. I actually enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I remember seeing it twice in the weekend it came out.
Okay.
Because I really enjoyed it, even with the length.
Yeah, I was there opening weekend. I remember, like, I like to see things on opening weekends, you know, back when we could actually go to movies.
Right.
And I did see it opening weekend, and I even remember the crowd being like, huh.
Yeah, and exactly.
You know, like, I mean, I remember there's only a couple movies that like the audience has been a huge part of it, like a lot of Star Wars movies,
right?
And I can tell you stories about seeing different Marvel movies and Star Wars movies and that kind of stuff. But like this one, I just remember being in the movie theater and seeing, and like there's, I mean, like there's a lot of like we're all excited because we're at midnight and we're all excited and stuff too. And it was just over the course of the movie, it's just sort of like. Yeah, it's just like the diminishing. You just sort of get to like this median place where you're like, "Ooh, yeah."
It's 3 hours. It's the three. It's the runtime.
It really is a grueling time.
This is not a movie you see
it. Your emotions.
Yeah, you don't see this movie at midnight. No. But I'll tell you this: the reason why I really enjoyed this movie is because it was something that you never thought you'd see. You never thought you'd see the Frank Miller comic really brought to life in this way. Yeah, and I got to say, I love Ben Affleck's Batman.
Yeah, I really do too. I was on a show talking about Daredevil, and I was saying like he was not the perfect casting for Daredevil, but for this Batman, I think he's great.
Yes,
I mean, I really think that he gives it his all. I think so I've taken some shots at Zack Snyder, and fair enough, but I will say he is great with actors. He treats them very well. He is excellent at casting, and they come back.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He does like a lot. I mean, as we're going to find out, some directors really alienate actors, but like the same people come through. Like he met Carla Gugino when he did Sucker Punch. She's the voice of the computer in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. She did like an almost uncredited role, and she's freaking Carla Gugino just because she's friends with Zack Snyder and she really had a good time working with him. I mean, like the cast has nothing bad to say about it. I mean, like as much as people like Zack Snyder, and even I've taken my shots and stuff too. He puts together a great film,
right? Like
he shoots it well. He well casts it. Great special effects. Like I mean, like there are issues I have with him, but like never that.
Yeah.
I mean, like he's the one who cast Gal Gadot,
right?
Or is it Gal Gadot?
Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot.
Gal Gadot. Yeah, I was thinking from the play. Gal Gadot. So he went Gal Gadot. That's her.
Yeah.
Like, he's the one that cast her, and we're all the better for it.
Well, and we've not talked about Amy Adams is a perfectly great Lois Lane. I think she's done a really nice job with it.
I love Amy Adams.
Yes.
So it's like I bring that love with me into it.
Right.
Is she the best Lois? I don't know, but she is like a very, very good actress and does well with what she's given, which isn't a whole lot.
Except
but
for
in this movie, nobody really gets a whole lot.
Well, but they had to do that bathtub scene. Let's just
of course.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
No, that was unnecessary.
Yeah, because this is a Superman who gets busy.
Yeah, this is not. I mean, come on. I agree. That's not anyway.
So I mean, obviously there's casting. We don't need to talk. I mean, basically, I'll say first film appearances for Aquaman, Flash, Cyborg. They'll have more to say about them because they're only in the movie for a couple minutes. I mean, like it's. I know the pitch meeting for Batman v Superman is really funny because they talk about the one thing what's one thing we've never seen superheroes do? Emailing. So we're gonna have a big emailing sequence, and so that's what it's like. It's weird that's how they introduce them, but Okay. All right. I mean, each of the little vignettes are pretty cool. So we get a little tease of what we're going to see. So before we move on off of this, I really want to talk about Lex Luthor. I really love Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. I think he's great. Every time he's on screen, I like the idea of a super genius, super awkward guy. Like he is completely amoral.
Right. He
has basically almost like social anxiety because he doesn't know how to deal with normal people. He has all these plans and machinations, and he has 100%, he has a definite agenda. Like, he sees the problem coming, and he manipulates all these pieces along the board. Now, people will say, oh, his plan's ridiculously convoluted. And I'm like, I think he's not as much of a gamesman. I think he's mostly let's just push a bunch of stuff and see what happens. Oh, I don't get them as he's like, oh, I want to do this. They made a big thing of he does all this stuff to try and get the government to let him bring the kryptonite, even though they don't say it at the time, over, to officially have it come over. And they're like, he's Lex Luthor, he's a criminal, why can't he just do that? And he's like, yeah, he absolutely could. He could pay somebody to just smuggle it in. But his point is to try and get the government on his side.
Right.
So he's trying to have the legitimacy of the government behind him to do all these things. And when it doesn't go his way, he blows them all up.
Yeah. He's diabolical. Okay. He's diabolical.
He is diabolical. And he's completely uncaring about any other people. And I love it. I love it. It's such a different take on, we saw, He Who Must Not Be Named do basically his version of Gene Hackman.
Right.
And it was okay, yeah, I kind of see that. There's been some really good Lexes. Michael Rosenbaum is a great Lex.
Yeah.
It turns out John Cryer, is a fantastic Lex Luthor. All different. Do it. And I think Jesse Eisenberg gets a lot of crap for this, and I don't understand why. I guess the same thing, all you people who, raved about Men of Steel, how could you be mean to Jesse? I think he's great. I hope he shows up in the 4-hour cut. I don't know that he will. It also is a little weird that when you go to prison, they don't just shave your head. There's a whole scene. I'm like, that's not something, unless there's a lot of lice in that prison. Yeah. I don't know why they would ever shave his head there, but.
Oh boy.
Okay, so what does this set up for the future then? So how do we leave the world? Well, Superman's dead, ish. We got Wonder Woman is back in the game. She's been out of circulation for a while. But now she is voted. Batman is assembling heroes. Ooh, I guess I shouldn't use that word. The bell has been rung. Ding ding.
Oh,
ding
yeah.
ding ding ding. Because we saw, especially I believe it's in the extended cut. Lex Luthor is in the ship communicating with someone. And so, we see, a guy with a gigantic, ridiculous helmet. And so that will be important later. Yeah, so I think we spent a lot of time on Man of Steel, so I'm not going to spend more time on this. I really think it's a very, very good movie. And I'm curious to see how we go there. And with the direction cut, it is almost 3 hours. So when people said, it's a 4-hour Justice League, I'm like, well, that's only an hour more than the extended cut there. But before we get into the superhero machinations and what's coming and the big thing, we have to talk about a love story.
I'm just a harlequin, baby. It's a sin, but I'm still in love with Joker, baby. I'm just a harlequin, baby. It's a sin, but I'm still in love with Joker, baby. Whoa, I'm in love with Joker, Joker. Whoa, I'm in love with Joker, Joker.
Truly the greatest love story of our age, Harley Quinn and Joker. So that was Suicide Squad parody by The Hillywood Show, available on YouTube, streaming for free. Go watch that. Get it for the clicks. Also, there's a huge production number that goes along with it, too. So, I just gave you that one little piece of it, but basically, it starts out with them on motorcycles, and they're in the club, and they're dancing, and, they go full out. It's pretty amazing. So, David Ayer, in September 2014, was hired to write and direct The Suicide Squad. Oh, I'm sorry. Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
The definite article becomes very important here. He described the film to Empire Line as the Dirty Dozen with supervillains. But because they had already set the release date, he basically had 6 weeks to write the screenplay and then start shooting. So it was a mad scramble. So as we sort of know all the people that sort of got hired in, but one thing I thought was interesting when I read about the casting was Tom Hardy was originally Rick Flag.
Oh.
But because he was still shooting the Revenant apparently has a notoriously long, arduous shoot. It went on, and he had to drop out because of that. And so they brought in Joel Kinnaman, star of For All Mankind, available on Apple TV Plus. So he dropped in. So on August 5th, 2016, we sat down and watched The Dirty Dozen of Supervillains, Suicide Squad. Rob, would you be so kind as to give us a synopsis of Suicide Squad?
Okay, here we go. 1 year after Superman's death, intelligence officer Amanda Waller convinces the U.S. government to create Task Force X, a team of supervillains. Too bad the first one she picked is a cursed pirate named Davy Jones, whose only weakness is his heart encased in a box. Hold up. Sorry. A demonic witch called Enchantress, whose only weak... Anyway, never mind. The witch goes ballistic, takes over Midway City, and Harley Quinn, with the help of from Task Force X members, has to stop her. They do, sort of. The Joker shows up too. Poor Harley. It's complicated. Bruce Wayne is working on a team or something. That's it.
That's true. Okay, so Batman does show up in this movie. Like, Batman, he's still out there and working. Like, in the first, 10 minutes of the movie.
Right.
Like, there's Ben Affleck as Batman in this movie. It was the movie that dealt with the world post Superman. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention Skybeam.
Yeah.
So that Task Force X was created because Amanda Waller realized that with Superman gone, there is a power vacuum. And so, they have less people to defend the country. Was Superman doing a whole lot of defending of the country? All right. I don't know what, that Harley Quinn and Killer Croc fill a Superman-sized hole, but you gotta use what you got, I guess.
Right.
So the movie came out, the preview came out, and people went kind of crazy for it because it was clearly inspired by Guardians of the Galaxy. So much so that apparently they hired the people who did the trailer to go back in and recut the movie after David Ayer. So there's a very notorious behind-the-scenes machinations that happened that did not end up getting a cohesive thing. So David Ayer has long said that he has a different cut of the movie, and so now there is a small movement of release the Ayer cut out there, and I think that would probably be the best thing for maybe a 2022 thing for HBO Max.
Well, I was going to say,
subscriptions start to lag.
We got to see how the subscriptions do in the next 60 days. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but what we are starting to see is that the Warner Brothers executives are not really very happy about where Zack Snyder is going with things.
Yeah.
So apparently this was supposed to be really closely tied to Batman v Superman, and they now started pulling away. They realized that the audience did not respond to Batman v Superman as much as they thought that they would. Apparently merchandise sales were way down, which is a big deal in the Batman and Superman thing. And the fans were sort of grumbling about it. So they started making changes. So one of the big changes was David Ayer has been very open about this, which I find very refreshing. They said to him about, you have the Enchantress, who has this 6,000-year-old thing in her, and she builds a machine? What's that about? And so David Ayer actually said on Twitter, it was supposed to be a boom tube, as she was under control of a mother box. But all the apocalypse elements were stripped out late in the game. The machine concept was an attempt to create a ticking clock and a world threat. So it really was supposed to be setting up Apocalypse, Mother Box, all these things, to set up directly what we're going to see in Justice League. But all that was put out to try and have it be completely on its own.
Wait, that would have made so much more sense.
It would have made so much more sense. I mean, apparently there was more Joker, there was more Batman, all this stuff was much more tied into Batman v Superman, but they wanted to distance themselves from that movie to try and and do the sort of soft reboot that we're going to see in the DC.
Oh, so is this them? Their course correction is we got to be more like the MCU.
I think so. I mean, I think they tried. I mean, and because we saw because the montage of introducing the Suicide Squad in the movie is very Marvel-esque, but none of the rest of the movie is.
Yeah.
Like they try to do like that part, and then the rest of the movie goes in a very different direction. So I'm fully in the camp of release the Ayer cut. Like I really would like to see what his intentions were. The movie itself is decent. Like Margot Robbie is fantastic. I mean, there's some really really good performances, and there's some not so great performances, and then it really just ends up being this group of people that none of whom you like except maybe Harley Quinn fighting a bunch of. Somebody referred to them as berry heads at some point because their heads got these weird speckle things on them, and it's just another monster trying to destroy the world with a sky beam, and okay,
it's incredibly forgettable. And I'll tell you, it's the takeaway from this is that wow, if you have an actor or actress that just blows the doors off their performance, which is what happened with Margot Robbie in this, because my God, she spawned her own movie from this, right? Like then that's the only reason you need to watch this movie.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's it.
Also, oddly, this is the only DCEU movie to win an Oscar. It actually won for Best Makeup and Hairstyle Design.
What?
I know.
Oh, my God. Okay.
So, from one powerful woman, let's talk about the other powerful woman.
Wonder Woman! Wonder Woman!
You knew I had to do it.
That's awesome.
Of course, that was for the Wonder Woman television series. So they've been trying to make a movie for Wonder Woman since 1996, and the names that have attached to it were people like Sandra Bullock, Mariah Carey, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Lucy Lawless, Kate Beckinsale, Angelina Jolie. Even Joss Whedon wrote a Wonder Woman script. If you do some clicky clacking of the keys over at YouTube, you can find a group of people actually did a in-person script read of his script, and it is problematic. But it's worth checking out if you're curious on. So in 2015, they signed Patty Jenkins to be the director. And so, Rob, would you tell us about the Wonder Woman movie?
So, modern-day Diana Prince gets a gift from Bruce Wayne that brings back multiple memories of Diana's. There's I always say this wrong. Themyscira?
Themyscira.
Okay.
Yeah.
Her mother, her mentor, her powers, and then one day in 1918, a U.S. pilot crash lands on the shores of their hidden paradise. Germans show up, a fight ensues. Diana is prepared to break all her people's rules to go into the broken world of men because Steve Trevor is really, really fine. Oh, and also Ares, and of course he is, because everybody thinks that. And Ares, the god of war, was jealous of the creation of mankind and is messing it all up. So Diana, Steve, and a ragtag band of special ops dudes go on an explosive adventure as if it were 1917. Not before having what is probably one of the greatest full superhero introductions ever in the history of comic book cinema. We will talk about that scene. Turns out the dude who is the head of the Allied Countries Warrant Council, who looks like Remus Lupin, is Ares, and he's stopped, albeit with the heartbreaking loss of one Steve Trevor. Back to current day, Diana considers the gift from her new Steve and knows love will save the world. The end. I gotta tell you, well, and this is a great movie. I mean, we can just say this, right?
Oh yeah.
But I think it is interesting that was it intentional that they teased the flirtations between Bruce Wayne and Diana Prince?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little unusual, but I mean, I guess to show that Bruce Wayne is Bruce Wayne.
Well, and because in the DCEU as this was unfolding, Superman's taken.
Yes,
he's not open. Like, because if you follow the comic book, obviously there's been other things, right? Like,
yeah.
I just find that interesting because I mean, this was clearly like he sends the little present and it unlocks this whole story. I'm like, wow, I am amazed at how important Batman is to this movie.
Yeah.
Which I mean
there's not in it.
Yeah, he's not even in it. Like, what's the deal with that? Anyway.
Oh, wait, before we go further, Rob. Skybeam?
Oh, my God.
No.
Well, I mean, there is the big white light, but
there's the big electricity thing, but there's Skybeam. I absolutely love this movie. I think this is the best of all of these movies.
Yes, yes.
I think it stands on its own. You don't need to have seen any of the rest of the stuff. Actually, it's so good that it makes what they had established for her character in Batman v Superman really ridiculous.
Yeah.
The fact that, like, she had this amazing, she's fantastic and she's amazing and she's flawed and she's learning and she's, noble and like has to make these hard decisions. And then like, the guy she knew for a week dies, and so she goes into seclusion for 90 years.
It's really, seriously. She gave up her entire way of life, all of it, all the tradition. I mean, for a dude, again, Chris Pine, but okay. But, okay, and then in a matter of, a few weeks, loses him and then gives it all up? Like, wow, I will tell you, like, that is that, not of this movie, but of the overall arc. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's your Superman. That's your Man of Steel, like, weirdness. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, it makes no sense for her at all, the character we see in this or the character we saw in there. Like, you're just like an archaeologist now? Like,
no.
Okay. I was digging around to find out what Patty Jenkins thought of Gal. Because she basically inherited her. So, I found an article that talked about it. So they said, let's talk a bit about Gal. You inherited her from Zack Snyder. Was it difficult to not get to choose your own Wonder Woman? And what is it about Gal that makes her such a good fit? So Patty Jenkins says, I remember when I read in the news that Wonder Woman had been cast and my heart sank. I'm sure we wouldn't have made the same choice. And then I started paying attention to her and watching her and looking at her, and it was just unbelievable. Frankly, I think they did a better job than I could have because I don't know that I would have scoured the earth as hard to find her. They were looking for all the same things I would have looked for, all the values that Wonder Woman stands for, exuding from someone in an honest way, and boy, did they find it. She shares every quality with Wonder Woman, and that's no joke. It's one of those rare things. You need someone who can appear to be Wonder Woman on screen. Every once in a while, there's a superhero casting that transcends because the person is so authentic to the character that it becomes identified with them, like Linda Carter or Christopher Reeve. And I would 100% agree.
I was just about to say every word. Every word is spot on. That is absolutely true. Yes.
Yeah. I can't even think of Wonder Woman without thinking of Gal now.
No.
She is that character.
And for all nothing but good stuff. I mean, well, we won't talk about the sequel, but that's another
that's not in continuity. Right?
That's not in continuity.
what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Ready for justice.
But I'm going to tell you, like, I mean, really, she is. And from the first moment you see her in this, like, it's wow. I mean, what makes it?
Yeah, I'd say we could just talk for an hour about how great this movie is. Just in every piece of casting, every decision they made. He's setting it. World War I is brilliant. Dr. Poison is brilliant. I love this movie. And then it ends obviously with her on the parapet, like ready to answer the call for action.
Right. And I want to go back and just say the sequence in the middle part of the movie where she reveals herself as truly Wonder Woman as you know her on the battlefield when they're trying to make grounds to get to where they're going. That is, I mean, we talk all the time on our other show about the MCU and its seminal moments.
Yeah.
I dare say that is the DCEU's top moment.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of all of these modern movies, like, that is the scene that is so well orchestrated, well scored, well shot. No, it goosebumps every time. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then obviously now that we have these people together, then obviously it's time to bring them all together.
In the great hall of the Justice League, there are assembled the world's 4 greatest heroes, created from the cosmic legends of the universe.
Maybe not 4.
Okay, I mean...
But, so... we all know the characters now. We know Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, Flash, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern. And, of course, we know the actors who are famous for playing them. Common, Hugh Keys-Byrne, Santiago Cabrera, Adam Brody, DJ Catrona, Megan Gale, and, of course, starring as Batman, Armie Hammer. Yeah, that's right. I'm talking about Justice League Mortal from 2008, the movie that didn't get made. So the first Justice League movie was this, directed by George Miller. And this movie got really freaking close.
Yes.
I mean, like, they were
costumes
fitting, they were building sets, they were in Australia. This movie was going to happen. And then through various circumstances and writer strike and all that stuff, the whole thing just fell apart and it went away. But like, it was really, really close. And it's amazing the amount of people, like the young people who are on there, and the fact that just Armie Hammer as Batman still just like blows my mind. But Common the rapper known as Common was going to be Green Lantern. Like, that's a great piece of casting.
Yeah.
Adam Brody is the Flash. I mean, that's really cool too. Yeah, but it was one of those things that it was almost there, and it just all fell apart. I think that's a fascinating story in and of itself. But for real, then in April 2014, Zack Snyder was announced he would be directing Justice League script, and they were bringing on Chris Terrio to write it. And so they announced that it would be in two parts. Part 1 in November of 2017, and Part 2 in a couple of years later. So Zack Snyder said the film would be inspired by the New Gods comic from Jack Kirby, which is great. It would be split into two parts. But then, by the time we get to the filming of this, Warner Brothers is having some cold feet. They're not liking what they're seeing. They're not liking the way Zack Snyder's doing. They're not liking the super serious approach. They're not liking what he's going, where he's going.
The
with this.
whole thing.
Yeah, like as he's shooting it, they're apparently we're now learning much more about the behind scenes. Like it was sort of a very close set kind of thing. We didn't hear anything, but now people are talking, and so the Warner Brothers executives actually convened a council of creatives and sent them to the set to just hang around. So people like Alan Heinberg, Seth Graham-Smith, Andrea Berloff, and Joss Whedon were sent down, and they would just hanging out as you're filming, just throwing in ideas, which is something directors love.
Oh my God.
And so Joss was there, sort of over Zack Snyder's shoulder as he was shooting all of this stuff. And then, of course, okay, so I know we've had some fun, but now serious tragedy strikes. May of 2017, Zack Snyder's daughter dies. And so I'm not going to make any jokes or anything about this. This is a serious matter. She unfortunately committed suicide. So I know that the people who were behind the Snyder Cut campaign have done a lot to raise money for that. I think it's fantastic. It is a horrible thing. So any of the stuff we're talking about here is under the guise of a terrible, terrible thing that happened to Zack Snyder. The story we were told was, because of this tragedy, Zack Snyder has decided to step away from the film, and they have brought in Joss Whedon to finish his film and send it out there. And so that's what we thought had happened. So, Rob, would you give us a synopsis of the movie that we actually saw in theaters?
Steppenwolf, Parademons, Mother Boxes, Cyborg, Flash, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Batman, Frankenstein.
And the Russian family.
I wasn't even going to go there. No, but and I'm not done. Bruce Wayne left Martha Kent to die broke and broken. That's bullshit.
Yes.
Lex Luthor, jail, bad stuff's coming. The end.
Skybeam.
Skybeam.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how much that movie deserves.
Right?
So a movie comes out that should be it, but that should be that.
That should be the end of that.
It wasn't. Because what we have now learned is that that's not what was going on. So what we learned is that horrible, horrible tragedy. Zack Snyder is just a wreck. I mean, his family is just despondent over this. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. And the Warner Brothers are like, okay, so you're coming back, you're finishing the movie, right? You're going to do the job. And they're still coming at him about changes, make it funnier, make it smaller, make it lighter. Right. And now we reveal that he's actually said he just got tired of the fight. Yeah. He fully intended, he and his wife, who is his producer partner, has produced all of his movies, wanted to come back and do this stuff, but he just did not have the emotional strength, the executive functions. And those who lived through this last year know exactly how that feels. I just don't have it in me. And so he basically just gave up. I can't do this anymore. This is just me. So he gave up on the film. So he did not have them fire him. He stepped away to prevent that, and then let it go on. And then everybody got disappointed. And then everything went terrible. So we then learned that when Joss Whedon came in, he wrote 80 pages of new script and had to shoot all of it in 3 months. Apparently it wasn't just that the cast did not like all the changes that were being made. Apparently things got really, really bad. And to quote Ray Fisher, Joss Whedon's on-set treatment of the cast and crew of Justice League was gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable. And Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa have both said, yeah, Ray is not wrong. And the rest of the cast, has remained silent.
Yeah.
Nobody has stood. I mean, like obviously there's a lot of he said she said. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of stuff going on. So we can't really get into all of that stuff.
Well,
I think we should.
and no, because guess why? Here's the other reason why: slander. There's laws against that, and you don't want to get into that. Like, hey, people
we
don't know
what happened.
We don't know,
but
right?
I'm of the mind of let's believe Ray Fisher and go from there.
Right.
But that's for the lawyers to decide, unfortunately. But the one last controversy we need to touch on before we move on is Mustache Gate. Because by the time they got everybody back together again, Henry Cavill was already shooting Mission Impossible, where he had grown a very large mustache. Well, they brought him back for Superman, but Paramount contractually would not let him shave the mustache off because they would need him for reshoots afterwards. And they demanded so they had to CGI out his mustache all of his Superman shots in Justice League.
Okay, and if you don't know about this, there was stories all over the place. But I want to say this though. There's two things that just blow my mind about this. Number one, what dicks, right?
Yes.
Like everybody, because guess why? Henry Cavill is a strapping young man. I am sure his facial hair grows back speedily. Like, or
just a studio pissing contest.
I mean, what a dick move! Because guess what? It's not that hard for a good, high quality person who makes applications for faces for film to make a mustache to fill in until his mustache grows back. So if the problem was scheduling, that shouldn't have been a problem. It's entirely more insane to say, no, you can't shave the mustache, digitally take it out, and then and then if that wasn't bad enough, dude, you could have paid someone's nephew like $500 and some Mountain Dew with a deep fake, with some deep fake software, and done a better job than what they did.
There actually people have gone in and deep faked it over the mustache thing, and it looks so much better.
I just don't understand. And wait,
I find it so unbelievably petty that it's just enjoyable to me.
I just want to say this. Just a couple things about this movie is that, because this is all that's worth saying as far as I'm concerned. I remember going into this, my wife and daughter, we had incredibly high expectations. I'll never forget us both looking at each other when it was over and saying, well, I'm never going to watch this movie again. Like, literally, that was it. Now, there are two scenes that you can still see. The one is the scene where the Flash is running around Clark.
Yes.
And Clark sees him.
Superman sort of resurrection.
Okay,
thing,
yes,
The best, and I believe that is like the 20% of Zack Snyder's original film that was retained into Justice League.
That is good, and I'm going to say this, I don't know about this scene, but I always love the scene where Aquaman is sitting on the lasso and is talking honestly. I just always think that's very funny. But can I tell you, though, I alluded to it, one of the most ridiculous things is that you had an entire movie based around Clark and Bruce Wayne's connection of their mother. And you're telling me that one of the main plot points of this movie is that Martha Kent's hit bad times. She's going to lose the farm. Bruce Wayne forgot about her. After he spent an entire third act in another movie saving her. That is such garbage. Yeah. I don't know how that was allowed to do. But here's my last thing I'm going to say about this movie.
Yeah.
The biggest problem with it? The title. I don't know if I've ever told you this. No.
I don't think so.
They had a perfect title. And they didn't use it, and I don't understand why. The first movie, Man of Steel. The second movie, Dawn of Justice.
Yes.
This movie should have been called League of Heroes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, keep with the
blank of blank
convention.
I mean, how did you not do that? Calling it Justice League is so low-hanging fruit. Like, okay, Justice League. Like...
See, and I mean, obviously, the comparisons are obvious, but like to look at what happened with the Avengers movie, the first one, and this, and just go, you had so much more time, so much more money, and this is what you.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's horrible. Sorry, I'm sorry, everybody. I know everybody works really hard,
and we spent enough time on it, so now we wipe that away because you don't ever need to think about that movie again. Because in your head canon, that can not exist anymore because. What's coming now is, of course, the Snyder Cut. And what better way to introduce it than with a sing-along? Okay, everybody knows the word, so as soon as you're ready, you can go right ahead. Okay, go ahead. Secret chord, right? I'm right. Come on, people. I'm listening. I don't hear you singing.
Oh.
Right?
Oh boy.
Yeah, it goes like this. Right? Okay. You guys are not singing along. Okay, all right. It's been 2 hours. I imagine you're all tired. Okay, all right.
David never should have been looking at that woman on the roof. That was wrong. He knows that.
What is the secret chord? I don't know. I guarantee you that song is in this movie somewhere. So let's talk about, finally we're here, the Snyder Cut. We have not seen it. So at the time of this, it have not been released yet, but we're eagerly anticipating it. So on May 20th, Zack Snyder officially announced that HBO Max will be releasing his cut of the Justice League in 2021, and so we're here. We're knocking on the door. It's right there.
Unbelievable.
For $70 million to complete the special effects, musical score, and editing. And I've been saying it since this was announced. I was saying it to you now, to everyone here. It's a bargain.
Oh, yeah.
For the amount of time and press and attention they're getting, $70 million is nothing. $70 million is how much it cost them to make Daredevil. And this is going to get way more press than I think. I mean, yeah. So they, apparently all of this stuff was shot. We're told he only shot 4 minutes of extra footage.
Do you believe that?
It's shocking to me, and the fact that 3 of that is probably just Jared Leto.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that. That seems
I don't know.
Why would
there's a new Flash piece, which I love that story because Ezra Miller is currently shooting the new Fantastic Beasts movie. I don't even know if that has a title yet, and they had him. So Zack Snyder shot him remotely using a drone from the other side of the world. He was controlling the camera and shooting Flash running or doing something like that. I find that fascinating.
There's no way you spent time and effort filming scenes and you only got 4 minutes of new footage.
I don't know. I mean, he must have just shot and shot and shot. I think this was a Superman 1-2 situation where he intended to use a bunch of the stuff in there. So we don't know much. We know it's 4 hours long. We know it's 6 chapters, and we know the chapter names. So here's what I'm going to tell you. So part 1 is called Don't Count on It, Batman. Part 2 is The Age of Heroes. Part 3 is Beloved Mother, Beloved Son. Part 4 is Change Machine. Part 5 is All the King's Horses. Part 6 is Something Darker. And the epilogue, this just is breaking news, the epilogue is called A Father Twice Over.
Oh, what?
I don't know, but there's a couple things that we know going in. So let's make sure our plot is, and we know what's in, because there are things that are in and things that are out. So we need to make sure so everything that happened in Man of Steel happened. Everything that happened in Batman vs. Superman happened. Everything that happened in Wonder Woman happened. Everything that happened in Suicide Squad happened. And that's it. Nothing else is relevant to what we're talking about here.
Well, there only would be the original Justice League and Aquaman.
So Aquaman is out.
Right.
That. No matter where it took place, that was shot and done after this movie. So that's out. Wonder Woman 1984 is also out. The continuity of that does not take part of this as well, and obviously no television series or anything.
Gotcha.
And at the time that I started this, the Flash is not named the Flash. He's just Barry.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So Aquaman, we'll see what that is. But they have their symbols and stuff too, but they're not actually known by the thing. So a couple more things. I know I've kept you a long time, so I appreciate you being there. But we're going to get to a couple things. One thing you're going to need to know is the format. So I was actually talking to Rob about this before we recorded. He did not know this, so I wanted to make sure I put this in here so nobody freaks out. So when you sit down to watch it, and you fire it up, and probably Hallelujah starts playing, I'm guessing. I don't know. We'll see. And you're going to go hey, something wrong with my TV? How come it's not filling the frame? Yeah. So, Justice League was formatted in 133:1 ratio, which means it's square. That's not your TV. It's not HBO Max. It's Zack Snyder. So, why? Well, when he was working on the IMAX version of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. The IMAX screens are 1:43:1, so they're squares because that's where IMAX screens are. So if you got a chance to see Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice in IMAX, or even Watchmen, they did the same thing, or Dark Knight, the IMAX things would revert to square. And the rest of it is wide, and so basically we have almost bars at the top and bottom, and then it would be full frame, and then bars top and bottom. He fell in love with the square. He just loved it, and so since then, he's decided that that's what he's going to shoot in. So he reformatted Justice League to be a square. So when you watch it, there will be black bars on the left and right of your image.
Now,
and that's intentional.
Okay, can I just say this? And I know I'm not that guy, because I understand how important this is for the art.
Yeah.
The HBO Max should allow you the option to zoom in, like you do on your phone.
Yeah.
I mean, really, because
I agree.
That's
people are going to get confused, and they're going to get a lot of technical questions about why is it.
And I mean, here's the deal. I mean, I want to see it because that significantly changes the detail that you're going to see for most people, depending on the size of your television. But, interesting.
I'm curious to see how it reformats itself on an iPad, which is much more square, you know?
Oh, no, it would be perfect.
I would still recommend whatever your big television is, watch it on that.
Right.
This is not being released theatrically yet.
Right.
So you can only watch it at home. But I'm curious to see how that would be, because that is much more of that ratio, and they do sometimes automatically reformat stuff too.
That's... Okay, that's interesting. Okay, by the way, the title of the Chapter 2, Age of Heroes. See, that's close. That's close to my League of Heroes.
Close. It is very close. Yeah, I know. I mean, we could. I'm sure people have already been debating about these things, but we don't need to get into that because I think we've kept people here long enough. So, obviously, Superman's dead. Batman is on the trying to find these heroes because the bell has been rung and something's coming. Wonder Woman is with him. The other heroes are out there, but they have not met. And at the last we saw, Cyborg was in pieces. And so they don't know what else out there. And so there was a significant portion of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which took place in what was called the Nightmare. That's played with a K. Nightmare. A possible awful future. And I believe a large section of this movie will also take place in there. So we're going to see sort of what happens if Superman turned bad, and this is what it is, and the kind of dark side. So I don't know. So I really don't know what to expect in here, because how much we know very, very little. Maybe half an hour, maybe 45 minutes of Justice League the movie was actually based on what his original stuff was, and now this is 4 hours. So there's going to be huge amounts of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and we know,
no idea,
and we know for sure that we're getting. I know to much people's happiness, we're getting a completely new rendered Steppenwolf.
Yes,
I mean completely different.
Completely different.
Right.
Yeah, we've seen little bits and pieces of it too, and we're going to see Darkseid. Darkseid was not a part of it; it was sort of alluded to, but we're actually going to see him here. There is, a huge amount of Cyborg's story will be in the movie. A lot of Barry Allen. We're going to see. We're going to see Iris Allen is going to be. Or Iris West, I guess at the time, is going to be a significant part of it. A character that was not in the. I guess, do we say original?
Right.
I don't know. We're getting some weird nomenclature stuff here. But yeah, so there. So I think you're ready.
Oh, I'm ready.
I've taken you on a long, long journey. Hopefully, this. I didn't. This maybe is your commute all the way to work and back again, or maybe you have to keep working around your block just waiting for me to wrap up. But I think that pretty much covers everything. And so then, obviously, we here at the next reel will be back to talk about the 4-hour Zack Snyder cut of Justice League once it has been released. But we wanted to be here first to pray to get your mind right, to help you be ready to experience it as best you can. And I hope we've done that.
Indeed. Well done.
Thank you so much for listening. This has been the first chapter in the Curiosity Codex, but there are still many pages left to decipher. We're part of the True Story FM family of podcasts. Find out more about us at truestory.fm. Our theme music is Intrusion by Severed Personality, aka Kevin MacLeod. The voice of the Codex is Vicky Hall. Find her on the web at vickyhall.squarespace.com. My co-host is Rob Cabasco. Find him with me on the Marvel Movie Minute podcast, and my name is Kyle Olson.
The Codex is closed. For now.